2 words. That is all it took to empty a tax booth outside Capernaum. The man sitting there was good with numbers. Debts were written in his ledger, and no one in town loved him for it, because he collected for an empire nobody wanted. Then a shadow fell across his table. A voice said, "Follow me." And he stood up, left the coins where they lay, and walked away from the only life he knew. The Gospel, later handed down under his name, preserves the New Testament's most extensive collection of the teachings of Jesus. Tonight we are going to walk through it slowly, the way you walk a mountain road in the dark. 15 resting places, from the valley floor to the summit, with no hurry in any of them. You do not need to stay awake for the whole climb. The road knows the way, and so does the voice beside you. The mountain road is quiet now. Take the first step with me. Chapter 1. The Man at the Toll Booth. Along the busiest roads of Galilee, somebody was often waiting to collect a toll. That is a detail we forget when we imagine the ancient world. We picture open country, fishermen and farmers, dusty villages under a wide sky. But the great roads were watched. Goods moved along them, fish and grain and oil and cloth, and wherever goods moved, the empire wanted its share. So at the edge of towns like Capernaum, on the road that ran toward Damascus, there sat small wooden booths, and in the booths sat men with ledgers. The Gospel we are opening tonight remembers one of those men by name. As Jesus passed on from there, he saw a man called Matthew sitting at the tax booth, and he said to him, "Follow me." And he rose and followed him. 1 verse. That is all the introduction he gets. No family history, no description of his face, no record of what he was thinking. Just a man, a booth, a call, and a rising. But let me slow that verse down for you, because there is a whole life folded inside it, and we have all night. To sit in a tax booth in Galilee was to be a particular kind of alone. The taxes Matthew collected served an imperial system his own people did not control, and the men who collected them were not sent from far away. They were local men, neighbors, men who knew everyone's name and everyone's business, and who had chosen, for whatever reason, to profit from the arrangement. His own people had words for men like him, and none of the words were kind. In the Gospels you can still hear the phrasing they used. Tax collectors and sinners. The two went together in a single breath. One category of person, the kind you did not eat with, the kind whose testimony some would not accept. So picture him there on an ordinary working day. The lake is somewhere behind him, bright in the morning light. Fishermen are hauling their catch up the shore, men with families and friends, and a place at the table on the Sabbath. And Matthew sits at his booth, doing the one thing he is good at, counting what passes by, writing down what is owed. Whatever the job paid him, it is not hard to guess what it cost him. And then comes the shadow across the table. By this point in Matthew's story, Jesus was no stranger to Capernaum. The Gospel has already shown him healing in that town and in the country around it. A paralyzed man carried to him, a centurion pleading for his servant, crowds gathering along the shore of the lake. Word of him moved through those streets ahead of him. Matthew, sitting at the crossroads of all that traffic, had almost certainly seen him before, heard the stories, watched the crowds go by from the outside. The way he watched everything from the outside, which makes the 2 words so remarkable. Follow me. Not, explain yourself. Not, pay back what you have taken, and then we will talk. Just follow me. An invitation spoken to the one man in town everyone else had already crossed off. And Matthew rose and followed him. The Gospel adds one more scene, and it tells you what kind of man this was. The next thing we see is a dinner, a feast at the house, and the guest list is the only guest list a man like him could draw up. Other tax collectors, other outsiders, the whole crossed-off company of Capernaum, reclining at table with Jesus in the middle of them. When the religious men of the town objected, and they did object, Jesus answered them plainly. Those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick. I came not to call the righteous, but sinners. Hold that scene a moment. The first thing that New Life produced was a table where people like Matthew could meet the one who called him. In a way, the book we are about to walk through is that same table, made of words. Now, before we take another step up this road, I owe you some honesty, because honesty is how this journey travels, and a night guide who will not tell you the truth is no guide at all. The Gospel we call Matthew does not, anywhere in its pages, name its own author. The book itself is anonymous, like all four Gospels. The name comes from early Christian tradition, from the generations just after the Apostles. Early Christian tradition also identified this Matthew with the tax collector called Levi in the accounts of Mark and Luke, though the texts themselves never spell that connection out. Ancient writers passed the attribution down, and the Church has read the book under Matthew's name ever since. Modern scholars weigh that tradition in different ways. Some hold to the old attribution. Many believe the Gospel was composed a generation or more after the events, in Greek, by a careful Jewish Christian writer, drawing on earlier sources and testimony, whose exact name we cannot recover. That conversation is real, it is ongoing, and nothing in tonight's journey requires us to settle it. When I say Matthew tonight, I mean the voice of this Gospel. The voice the Church has listened to under that name for nearly 2,000 years. And yet, let me tell you why the old name has always fit the book so well. Take this as a literary reflection, not as proof of authorship. It is simply a way of hearing. Because the finished Gospel displays the careful habits of arrangement we associate with a record keeper. It is the most carefully organized of the four. Where Mark rushes, Matthew arranges. Events are gathered into groups. Teachings are collected, sorted, and set out in order, the way a man trained in accounts sets out columns. Numbers matter in this book. The opening genealogy is counted off deliberately, 14 generations, and 14, and 14, announced like a sum at the bottom of a page. The man who counted coins, tradition says, learned to count words. Whether or not that is how it happened, it is a fitting way to carry the book, and we will carry it that way tonight. Here is the shape of what was built, and this is the map for our whole climb, so let it settle in gently. Scholars have long noticed that this Gospel gathers the teachings of Jesus into 5 great discourses. 5 large blocks of teaching, each one ending with almost the same quiet formula when Jesus had finished these sayings. The Sermon on the Mount, the sending of the 12, the parables of the kingdom, the teaching on life together and forgiveness, and the final teaching about watchfulness. Many readers across the centuries have heard in that number an echo of the 5 books of Moses, as if the book were saying, softly, in its very architecture, here is teaching worthy to stand beside the oldest teaching Israel knows. Whether the author intended that echo is one more thing scholars discuss, and I give it to you as a reading, not a certainty. Tonight, those 5 discourses will be the 5 mountains of our road. And let me say this clearly at the trailhead, so nothing misleads you in the dark. Only some of these teachings were spoken on literal mountains. One came from a boat, another in a house. The 5 discourses become mountains in our telling because this Gospel loves high places, from the Sermon on the Mount to its final scene on a hillside in Galilee. The mountains are a map for the journey, not a claim about geography. A good guide tells you which lines are on the land and which are only on his map. So here is how we will travel. 15 resting places, from here at the valley floor to the summit. At each one we will stop and sit down and listen. Some rests are short, some are long. And you should know now, there is one resting place near the middle of the road, the 9th, where we will stay a long while. Only 3 sentences of teaching wait there. But they are the 3 sentences this Gospel folds around. the ones about the weary and the heavy laden. That rest is the reason many of you came tonight, whether you knew it or not. We will reach it in good time. For now, the first resting place is behind us. It was never really about geography either. It was about a man at a booth and the door that opened when the right voice called his name. Maybe that is the first gift this gospel offers anyone who opens it at night. It begins, for its namesake, with the assumption that a person is not their ledger. The call came to Matthew in the middle of his compromised, complicated, ordinary working day, and it did not ask him to become someone else first. It just said, "Follow me." And a man who thought his story was finished found out it was only beginning. The lamps of Capernaum are small and warm in the distance now. Ahead, the road rises through dark country toward a wilderness and a river where a wild voice is calling in the night. Chapter 2. The Wilderness Before the Mountain. The road climbs away from the lake now, and the country changes. Behind us, Capernaum had lamplight and rooftops and the smell of bread. Out here there is only rock and thorn, and the long empty dark between villages. Every land has country like this, land that nobody farms and nobody owns, where the wind moves all night with nothing to stop it. The Bible has a name for such country: wilderness. And it is here, of all places, that the story of the teacher truly begins. Before Jesus speaks a single word of teaching in this gospel, Matthew brings us into the wilderness twice. Once to hear a wild voice by a river, and once to watch the teacher himself walk into the empty country alone, hungry and tested. The gospel is carefully arranged, and the wilderness stands deliberately before the mountain. I think there is kindness in that arrangement, and by the end of this resting place, I hope you will feel it too. The wild voice first. In those days, John the Baptist came preaching in the wilderness of Judea, saying, "Repent, for the kingdom of heaven is at hand." Try to see him the way the crowds saw him. A man dressed in woven camel hair, with a leather belt, the clothing of the old prophets, the clothing of Elijah from the ancient stories. He eats what the wild country gives, locusts and wild honey. He owns nothing worth stealing. He wants nothing the cities can offer. And he stands at the Jordan River, at the low crossing places, and he calls out to anyone who will listen. And here is the astonishing thing. They came from Jerusalem, the text says, and from all Judea, and from all the region around the Jordan. Think about what that means. People left their houses, their markets, their comfortable routines, and walked out into the Badlands to hear a man tell them they needed to change. Not to hear that they were fine. To hear the one word polite society never says out loud: repent. Why would anyone make that journey? I believe people are exhausted by pretending. There is a weariness that comes not from work but from performance, from holding the mask in place all day. And when a voice finally speaks with complete honesty, even hard honesty, something in the worn-out heart says, "At last." The crowds walked into the desert because the desert was the one place no one was pretending. And John gave them a way to stop pretending. Confession and water. They were baptized by him in the river Jordan, confessing their sins. Down into the water with the old weight, up out of the water, facing a new direction. It was simple, and it was public, and it must have felt like the first deep breath some of those people had taken in years. But John kept saying that he was not the point. His whole message leaned forward, like a man pointing up the road. "One is coming after me," he said, "who is mightier than I, whose sandals I am not worthy to carry." And then, one ordinary day, the one he meant was standing in the crowd. Then Jesus came from Galilee to the Jordan to John to be baptized by him. John himself was staggered by it. The gospel records his protest, and you can hear the bewilderment in it. "I need to be baptized by you, and do you come to me?" It is the reaction of an honest man meeting someone he knows is better than himself. This is backward, he is saying. You should be holding the water, not standing in it. And the first recorded words of Jesus in this entire gospel are his answer, "Let it be so now, for thus it is fitting for us to fulfill all righteousness." Listen to what is happening in that sentence, because it sets the tone for everything the teacher will ever do. He steps into the water meant for sinners. He has no confession to make, yet he stands where the confessing people stand, shoulder to shoulder with the compromised and the weary, in the same river, under the same sky. From his very first act, he refuses to keep a safe distance from the people he came for. If you have ever felt that God grades from far away, hold this scene as you drift. The first thing Jesus does in public is get into the water with everyone else. And heaven answers. The text says the heavens were opened, and the Spirit of God descended like a dove and came to rest on him. And a voice from heaven said, "This is my beloved Son, with whom I am well pleased." Beloved, before one sermon has been preached, before one miracle has been done, before any crowd has cheered or any work has been accomplished, the voice speaks, and the word it chooses is beloved. The love comes first, and everything else grows out of it. This gospel preserves that order, and the order itself is good news. Now the road turns harder, and I will walk it with you gently. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. Led by the Spirit. Mark that. The wilderness was not a wrong turn or a punishment. It was part of the road. And for 40 days and 40 nights he fasted there, alone in the empty country. And afterward, the text says simply, he was hungry. 40 days. The number itself is an echo, and the first hearers would have caught it at once. 40 years Israel walked the wilderness. 40 days Moses fasted on the mountain. The teacher is walking his people's oldest road, step for step. But where they stumbled, he will stand. 3 times the tempter comes, and I want you to notice the shape of each temptation, because the shape is where the meaning lives. First, the stones. If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become bread. It sounds almost reasonable. He is starving, and the power is his. But underneath the suggestion is a whisper, use what you are to serve yourself first. And Jesus answers with scripture, words from Deuteronomy, from Israel's own wilderness years. Man shall not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God. Second, the temple heights. Throw yourself down, the tempter says, and this time he quotes scripture too, a psalm about angels bearing you up, which tells you something worth keeping. Even holy words can be bent toward wrong ends, and the sound of a Bible verse is not the same as the truth of one. Jesus answers, again from Deuteronomy, you shall not put the Lord your God to the test. Third, the high mountain, and all the kingdoms of the world in their glory, offered for a single act of worship. The shortcut, the crown without the cross, and the answer comes final and quiet. Begone, Satan, for it is written, you shall worship the Lord your God, and him only shall you serve. Then the devil left him, and behold, angels came and were ministering to him. Now let me tell you why I believe the wilderness was placed right before the mountain of teaching, and why I called the arrangement kind. Every word Jesus is about to preach, he preaches as someone who has been out in the empty country himself. Hungry, alone, pressed hard in the dark. When he stands on the mountainside and says, blessed are the poor in spirit, he is not speaking from a comfortable distance. He has felt the floor of human weakness under his own feet. And notice what his weapon was, out there in the dark. Not thunder, not visible glory, remembered words. 3 times tested, 3 times he reached for old scripture he carried by heart, the way a traveler carries bread. That is a teaching before the teachings. The words we are climbing toward on this mountain road are not decorations for good days. They are provisions for wilderness nights. People have whispered them in hospital rooms and empty apartments and long deployments far from home, and they have held. Maybe you are in some wilderness of your own tonight. A dry season, a tested season, a season where the road home is hard to see. Then hear what this resting place has been saying under its breath the whole time. The wilderness is on the map. It is not proof that you took a wrong turn. Someone has been through this exact country ahead of you, and he came out of it gentle. The empty land is behind us now. Far ahead, up the rising road, you can just make out a hillside above the lake, and if the wind is right, the sound of a great crowd settling onto the grass. Someone is about to sit down and begin to speak. But for tonight, in this stretch of dark country, the last word belongs to the text itself, and it is a good word to fall asleep inside. Then the devil left him, and behold, angels came and were ministering to him. Chapter 3. Blessed are the quiet ones. The third resting place is a hillside, and the hillside is full of people. Word had spread by now. The Gospel says that great crowds followed him from Galilee and the Decapolis, from Jerusalem and Judea, and from beyond the Jordan. The sick had been carried to him and healed. The desperate had found him and been heard. And so they came, more and more of them, until one day the teacher looked at the crowds and turned and walked up the slope of a hill above the lake. Seeing the crowds, he went up on the mountain, and when he sat down, his disciples came to him. And he opened his mouth and taught them. Let the small details of that verse settle over you like evening light, because each one is doing quiet work. He sat down. In our world, speakers stand. In his world, teachers sat. Sorting was the posture of authority in the ancient synagogue, the position a rabbi took when the words to come were weighty and meant to be kept. So when Jesus sat down on that hillside, everyone present understood the signal. This would not be small talk. This was a teacher taking the teacher's seat, with the grass for a classroom floor and the lake shining below. And then Matthew gives us the first collected discourse of his gospel, the first of the 5 mountains on our map, and this one truly was a mountain. The church came to call it the Sermon on the Mount, and it has become one of the most influential collections of teaching ever preserved. People who never opened a Bible can still finish its sentences. Turn the other cheek. Do not worry about tomorrow. Ask, and it will be given. We will spend 5 resting places inside this one sermon, tonight's longest and gentlest stretch of road. And it begins with a list. 8 sentences, each one starting with the same strange, wonderful word. Blessed. Before I read them to you, slow and whole, I want to sit with that word for a moment, because everything depends on it. The Greek word is makarios. It means blessed, happy, fortunate, well off. It is the word you would use for someone whose life has turned out enviably. And that is exactly why the list that follows would have made the hillside hold its breath. Because the teacher took the word everyone used for the rich and the lucky, and he fastened it, one sentence at a time. To all the people nobody envies. Listen to who gets called fortunate in the kingdom, he came announcing. Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. The poor in spirit, not the confident, not the self-assured, striding through the world certain of their own goodness. The poor in spirit are the ones who know they come up short, the ones with empty hands and no case to make for themselves. Every voice in every marketplace says such people are behind in life. The teacher says the kingdom already belongs to them, not will belong someday. Theirs is the kingdom. Present tense, first promise of the sermon, given to the empty-handed. Blessed are those who mourn, for they shall be comforted. Those who mourn. The hillside that day surely held them, and this hillside tonight holds them too. People carrying a grief with a name on it. People carrying losses too old or too strange to explain to anyone anymore. The world tends to look away from mourners after a while. The casseroles stop, the calls thin out. But in this list, the mourners are not behind the happy people. They are named second, near the front, and they are given a promise with no expiration written on it. They shall be comforted. The sentence does not say when, and I will not pretend it does. But it is signed, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." The meek. Our language has been unkind to this word. We hear weak, mousy, easily pushed around. But the word does not mean spinelessness. It suggests a gentleness that does not need to dominate, strength that has no need to shove. The meek are the people who could push back and choose gentleness instead, who absorb the small daily rudenesses of the world without passing them on. Every empire ever built has bet everything on the opposite proposition, that the earth goes to whoever grabs hardest. And where are those empires tonight? The teacher looked out from a hillside in an occupied country, with Roman power holding every road, and said the earth ends up with the gentle. It was either madness, or it was the deepest patience ever spoken out loud. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be satisfied. Hunger and thirst. The crowd on that hillside knew those words in their bodies, not as figures of speech. And the teacher reaches for the strongest cravings a human being can feel and says, that is how his people are meant to want the world made right. You ache for it. You are starving for things to be just, for wrongs to be mended, for goodness to win for once. Maybe you have been told you care too much, that you should lower your expectations of this world. This sentence says otherwise. That hunger is not naive. It is appetite for the very thing that is coming, and it will be fed full. Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy. The merciful, the ones who forgive debts they had every right to collect. Matthew wrote that line down with a former tax collector's hands, if the old tradition is right, and I have always wondered what it cost him to hear it first, a man whose whole profession had been the opposite of mercy. Mercy, the sentence promises, comes back to the merciful like an echo returning from a canyon wall. What you release comes home to you released. Blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. The pure in heart, not the perfect in record. Pure here means unmixed, undivided, the way pure water means water and nothing else. A heart that wants one thing instead of 40 things at war with each other. Most of us live divided, our attention scattered like light through a cracked window. The promise is that as the heart grows single, the sight grows clear, until at last it sees the one it was made to see. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. The peacemakers. Notice the making. This is not the blessing of the conflict avoiders, the ones who keep quiet to keep comfortable. Peace, in this sentence, is built the way a house is built, plank by plank, apology by apology, hard conversation by hard conversation. The people who do that slow work, in families and in nations, are called by the family name. Sons and daughters of God, because they are doing what their Father does, closing distances. Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. And last, the persecuted, the ones who pay for doing right. The sermon does not promise its listeners applause, and the teacher never pretended goodness would be cheap. But the list ends where it began, with the kingdom itself, the first promise and the last promise the same, like a ring closing. Now rest the climb a moment, and look at the whole list from a step back, because the shape of it says something the single lines cannot. Every voice you have ever heard has taught you, one way or another, who the fortunate people are. The strong, the certain, the untroubled, the ones winning. That list is carved so deep into us that we measure our own worth against it at 3 in the morning without even noticing. And most of the ache that keeps people awake, I have come to believe, is the ache of falling short of that list. Not rich enough, not confident enough, not happy enough, not enough. Then a man sits down on a hillside and reads out a different list entirely. And every category on it is a category the world calls behind. The empty, the grieving, the gentle, the aching, the soft-hearted, the single-hearted, the bridge builders, the ones taking the blows. He goes down the roll of everyone the world overlooks, and over each one he speaks the word reserved for the enviable, blessed. This next part is my own reading, and you may weigh it as that. The Beatitudes are not a ladder by which anyone climbs into the kingdom, 8 achievements to strain for before God will have you. But pain by itself is not the whole portrait either. They are blessings spoken over the kind of life the kingdom creates. Empty-handed before God, hungry for what is right, merciful, pure in purpose, willing to make peace and willing to pay for it. The teacher is blessing that life and describing it both at once, which means the Beatitudes are a gift and a portrait in the same breath. The gift says, "The kingdom stoops to the lowly, and you do not have to climb to it." The portrait says, "And this is what it looks like when the kingdom begins to grow in a person." Grace comes first. The shape of the life follows. If you are mourning tonight, this sermon opened with you in mind. If your spirit feels poor, if your hands feel empty, the first sentence of this teaching was addressed to your condition. According to the teacher on the hillside, the kingdom bends low toward exactly that emptiness, and what it plants there, over time, is the rest of the list. The crowd on the grass that day sat very still, I imagine. The lake below, the wind in the wild grain, and a list being read that turned the whole world gently upside down, or rather, right side up at last. And the teacher was only beginning. Ahead, at the next resting place, he will tell that ragged hillside crowd what they are. Salt, he will say, and light, and then he will open the old law like a jeweler opening a case to show what was shining inside it all along. For now, let the 8 sentences settle over you like a blanket drawn up. They are not an entrance exam. They are a blessing and a portrait of the life grace begins to form. Blessed are the quiet ones, lying in the dark, out of strength and out of answers. The kingdom stoops toward such as these. Rest now. The list is read, and grace is not finished with you. Chapter 4. Salt, Light, and the Deeper Law. The 4th resting place is only a few steps up the slope from the 3rd, because the teacher has not moved. He is still seated on the hillside, and the crowd is still spread across the grass, and the 8 blessings are still hanging in the air like the ringing after a bell. And now he looks out at them, his disciples gathered closest, and the crowd beyond, and he tells his people what they are. You are the salt of the earth. Stay with that word, you. He does not say, you could become salt if you improve. He does not say, salt is what the impressive people are. He looks at fishermen with cracked hands, at widows, at day laborers, at the followers who left everything, and the seekers still deciding, and he hands them an identity in the present tense. You are, and of all the things to call them, salt. We sprinkle it from shakers and forget it. But in the ancient world, salt mattered enormously for preserving food, for seasoning it, for sustaining ordinary life. Before anyone had a way to keep food cold, salt was how you kept anything at all. Rubbed into fish on the shore of that very lake, worked into meat before the heat of the day, salt held back decay. It preserved. It kept good things from going bad. And salt did one more thing, then as now. It brought out flavor, a pinch of it, scattered and invisible, and suddenly the whole dish tastes more like itself. So hear what the teacher was saying to his followers on that hillside, and through the page to his followers in every century since. You, the gentle and the merciful and the pure in heart, you are what keeps this world from spoiling. Not the powerful, not the loud. You, scattered through your towns and your families like salt through a meal, mostly invisible, absolutely essential. A little kindness, worked into an ordinary day, holds back more decay than anyone can measure. Then he reaches for a second picture, and this one he hangs in the darkness itself. You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. From that hillside in Galilee, when evening came, you could see them. Small towns on the high ground across the valley, their oil lamps kindling one by one at dusk, until each town became a soft constellation resting on its hill. No town ever decided to shine. It simply lit its lamps to live by, and the light did what light does. It travelled. Some tired shepherd far out in the dark hills would look up and see it and know there is warmth over there. There are people. I am not alone out here. That, says the teacher, is what you are. Nobody lights a lamp and puts it under a basket, he says. You put it on the stand, and it gives light to the whole house. In the same way, let your light shine before others, so that they may see your good works and give glory to your Father who is in heaven. Notice the direction of the glory. The light shines, the good works are seen, and the praise runs past you, upward, to the Father. Salt disappears into the meal. The city simply sits there being home. There is no performance anywhere in these pictures, and that is their rest. You were never asked to be the sun. You were asked to be a lamp in your own window, and lamps do not strain. They just burn. Now the sermon turns, and I want you to feel the ground shift, gently, under the crowd. Because a question was already forming on that hillside, and the teacher answers it before anyone asks. All this blessing of the lowly, all this talk of a kingdom arriving, was this new teaching a break with the old faith? Was he setting aside Moses and the prophets, the commandments their grandmothers taught them, the words at the center of their people's whole life? His answer settles the matter for the rest of the book. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. Fulfill. Fill full. Not tear down the old house, but finish it. Not blow out the ancient lamp, but raise its flame to full height. And then he says something that must have made the crowd sit up straight. Unless your righteousness exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Exceeds the scribes and Pharisees. To that crowd, this sounded impossible. The scribes and Pharisees were the professionals, the people who tithed their kitchen herbs and measured their steps on the Sabbath. If the entry bar was above them, who could ever get in? But wait, and listen to what the teacher does next. Because he is not raising the bar of performance. He is moving the whole question from the outside of a person to the inside. 6 times in a row now, he will take up an old command with the same gentle formula. You have heard that it was said, but I say to you, and each time he traces the commandment from the visible act down to its root in the human heart, the way you might follow a weed down to where it actually grows. Listen to the pattern. You have heard that it was said, you shall not murder. But I say to you that everyone who is angry with his brother will be liable to judgment. The old law fenced the act. The teacher walks back up the road, the act travels, past the insult, past the contempt, all the way to the anger smouldering where no court can see it. Murder, he is saying, is only the last step of a journey that begins in the heart. So deal with the journey at its first step. He even says, if you are offering your gift at the altar and remember that your brother has something against you, leave the gift. Go. Be reconciled first, then come back. Peace with your brother, he is saying, is itself part of worship. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you, the look that intends, the desire that is fed and cultivated, that is where the breach begins, long before any act. Again, from the deed to the root. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye, and a tooth for a tooth. Now be careful here, because that old law is often misread. In its day it was a law of restraint, a limit, one eye and no more, ending the endless spirals of revenge where a wound was repaid with a killing. But the teacher goes further still. Do not resist the evil person with evil in kind, he says. If anyone slaps you on the right cheek, turn to him the other also. If anyone forces you to go 1 mile, go with him 2 miles. His listeners knew exactly what that last picture meant. A Roman soldier, under the terms of the occupation, could compel a local man to carry his pack for a mile. It was a daily humiliation on those roads. And the teacher says, when the forced mile is over, keep walking. Choose the 2nd mile freely. In one stride you stop being the compelled and become the free, because no one can force a gift. This is not weakness dressed up. It is strength under control, refusing to let another person's wrong dictate your soul's response. And then the summit of the whole section. You have heard that it was said, you shall love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, so that you may be sons of your Father who is in heaven. For he makes his sun rise on the evil and on the good, and sends rain on the just and on the unjust. Love your enemies, not tolerate them from a distance. Love them and pray for them by name. And the reason given is not that enemies deserve it. The reason is the family resemblance. Your Father, the teacher says, is already doing this. Look up. The same sun that warmed your field this morning warmed the field of the man who wronged you. The rain does not check names before it falls. Heaven has been quietly kind to the undeserving since the beginning, and every sunrise is the proof. To love an enemy is simply to join the family business. At first hearing, the deeper law sounds heavier than the old one. Anger judged, not just murder. The heart examined, not just the hands. Enemies to be loved, not just endured. Who can carry all that? And if you hear it as a new stack of demands, it will crush you before midnight. But I do not believe the teacher was stacking demands, and here is my reading of this whole stretch. I believe he was describing a healed heart, the way a physician describes health. He is telling us what a human being looks like when the kingdom has finished its work in them. No anger festering in the cellar. No hidden ledger of grudges. A heart so whole that even an enemy cannot make it hate. That is not a burden. That is a portrait of freedom. And the sermon's opening blessings already told us how the healing begins. It begins with the poor in spirit, the empty-handed, the ones who know they cannot manufacture such a heart themselves and are ready to receive it as a gift, the way soil receives seed. The section closes with a line that frightens people at midnight. So let us hold it up to the light before we move on. You therefore must be perfect, as your heavenly Father is perfect. The old word, translated perfect, carries the sense of complete, whole, grown to full purpose, the way a tree heavy with fruit is complete. This is not a demand that you produce flawless performance before you sleep tonight. But neither is it a decoration. It is a real summons to wholeness, to a love no longer divided between neighbor and enemy, shaped after the Father who sends sun and rain on both. That summons is serious, and it is lifelong, and the grace that spoke the Beatitudes first is the same grace that walks it with you. The lamps in the far villages are burning low now. The crowd on the hillside pulls their cloaks a little closer, and the teacher's voice goes on, quieter, deeper into the evening. Ahead of us waits the stillest part of the whole sermon, the closed door, the secret room. The teacher is about to say that the truest things you ever do will be the things nobody sees, and inside that teaching, folded like a letter, waits the most famous prayer in the world. But there is no hurry on this road. Lie back and hold the 2 small pictures the teacher handed out first. Salt, doing its quiet work, unseen in the meal. A lamp in a window, burning without strain. You do not have to be the sun tonight. The life he calls his people to is smaller and steadier than that. Salt in the meal, a lamp in the house. Chapter 5. The door that closes softly. The 5th resting place is the quietest one on the whole mountain road. The evening has deepened around the hillside now. The crowd has settled low into the grass, families leaning together, and the teacher's voice has dropped with the light. He is no longer speaking about the wide world, about salt and cities and enemies. He is about to speak about the smallest room in the house, the one with the door that closes softly. Because the sermon now turns to a danger nobody on that hillside had a word for, though every one of them knew the feeling. The danger of doing right things for the wrong audience. Beware of practicing your righteousness before other people in order to be seen by them, for then you will have no reward from your Father who is in heaven. In order to be seen, that is the phrase to hold. The teacher is not warning against being seen. He said 2 rests ago, let your light shine before others. He is warning against doing good as a performance, where the seeing is the point, where the deed is really a small theatre with yourself in the leading role. And then, with a gentleness that still has an edge of humor in it, after 2,000 years, he paints the picture of religion as theatre. When you give to the needy, he says, sound no trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do in the synagogues and in the streets, that they may be praised by others. Truly, I say to you, they have received their reward. Sound no trumpet. Whether anyone ever literally hired a trumpeter for their almsgiving, the cartoon lands perfectly. The big announcement, the visible generosity, the glance around to confirm the audience caught it, and the word translated hypocrites had associations with acting and playing a role. Here it names people whose outward devotion has become a performance. Not liars exactly. Performers. People wearing the mask of goodness, collecting applause. And notice, the teacher does not say the applause fails to come. He says something quieter and sadder. They have received their reward. Paid in full, on the spot, in the only currency performance can earn. The nod, the reputation, the moment of being admired. It comes, and then it is over, and there is nothing else behind it. The applause was the whole payment. Then he opens the other door. But when you give to the needy, do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing, so that your giving may be in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Do not let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. Giving so quiet, so free of self-congratulation, that you almost keep the secret from yourself. No record kept. No credit collected. The gift simply leaves your hand and goes to do its work, unsigned. And here is the sentence underneath this whole resting place, the one I want you to fall asleep holding. Your Father who sees in secret. Sees in secret. Most of us spend our lives assuming the opposite, that the secret places are the unseen places. That what happens behind closed doors, in unrecorded kindnesses and unwitnessed struggles, happens off the record. And the ache of that is real. Maybe you know it. The years of care nobody measured. The patience nobody praised. The quiet doing of the right thing over and over, while louder people collected the credit. The teacher says the record has been kept all along. There is an audience in the secret room, and it is the only audience whose opinion outlasts the evening. The Father sees in secret. Every unsigned gift has been signed for. Every invisible faithfulness is on file, with your name spelled correctly. Nothing done in love has ever once been done unseen. Then the sermon moves from giving to praying, and the same 2 doors appear. When you pray, the teacher says, do not be like the performers, who love to stand and pray in the synagogues and at the street corners, that they may be seen by others. They have received their reward. And do not heap up empty phrases as the pagans do, who think they will be heard for their many words. 2 mistakes, notice, not 1. The first is praying to impress people, prayer as performance. The second is praying to impress God, prayer as quantity, piling up words like a man shoveling coins across a counter, hoping the sheer volume will move heaven. The teacher waves both away with one homely sentence. Your Father knows what you need before you ask him. Before you ask, prayer, then, is not information. You are not briefing heaven. You are not filing a request with a distant office that might lose the paperwork. You are a child talking to a father who already knows, which means the talking itself is the point. The company, the nearness, the unloading of the heart to someone who was already carrying it. But when you pray, go into your room and shut the door, and pray to your Father who is in secret. And your Father who sees in secret will reward you. Go into your room and shut the door. In the small houses of Galilee, most rooms were shared. The one room with a door that closed was often the storeroom, the pantry, an inner closet with no window, the least impressive room in the house. That is the sanctuary the teacher recommends, not the synagogue steps, not the street corner, the pantry, because the whole point is to pray where performing is impossible, where there is no audience left except the one who sees in secret. And then, so they would know what to say behind that door, he gave them words. Pray then like this, he said. And what followed was a prayer so short you can say it in half a minute, and so deep that 2,000 years have not touched the bottom of it. Our Father in heaven, the prayer that would be carried out of that hillside crowd into every century and every language, whispered in stone chapels and prison cells, taught by grandmothers to children at bedsides on every continent, prayed at weddings and at gravesides, in hospital corridors in the smallest hours, by billions of voices, most of them tired, many of them barely believing, all of them welcomed. A prayer a child can memorize, and a lifetime cannot exhaust. It asks for bread and forgiveness and protection, the things a human being actually needs before nightfall. And it never once says the word I. From beginning to end it says our and us, so that even a person praying utterly alone in a locked room is, in the very grammar of the prayer, standing in a family. I am not going to read it to you now. I told you at the start of our climb that one promise would be kept at the very end of the night, and this is the promise. When the last resting place is behind us and the summit is reached, when there is nothing left on this road but sleep, the final words you hear tonight will be that prayer, whole, slow, line by line, the way it was meant to be received. Some gifts belong at the door of sleep, and this is one of them. Let it wait for you there, like a lamp already lit in the last room of the house. The sermon closes this section with fasting, and the teaching is the same shape a third time. When you fast, the teacher says, do not look gloomy like the performers who disfigure their faces to advertise their hunger. Wash your face. Anoint your head. Keep the secret between you and your Father, who sees in secret and will reward you. 3 practices, giving, praying, fasting, and one single teaching, stitched through all of them like a bright thread. The realest things happen behind the closed door. And I believe this teaching about secrecy is one of the most restful things Jesus ever said. Here is why. Performance is exhausting. You know this in your body. Living for an audience, any audience, means the show never closes. Every word measured for its effect. Every good deed checked for witnesses. Every failure hidden. Every success displayed. The self endlessly curated like a shop window. People are worn thin by it, and half the sleeplessness in the world, I suspect, is stage fright. The mind at midnight, rehearsing tomorrow's performances and reviewing today's. And into all that, the teacher speaks one liberating sentence. The audience that matters is already behind the closed door with you, and that audience is not a critic. It is a father. You can stop performing. That is the good news hidden in this stretch of the sermon. The unseen room is not where your life goes unwitnessed. It is where your life is most witnessed, most known, most kindly kept. So here is a small thing you might do, tonight or any night, and it costs nothing. Let the day's performances end early. Before sleep, in the dark, with the door of the room closed and the door of the day closing, say anything at all to the one who sees in secret. It does not need eloquence. He knows what you need before you ask. Even silence, offered in that direction, counts as conversation between a child and a father who never once looked away. The hillside is very still now. Here and there in the crowd, a child has fallen asleep against a shoulder, and nobody moves to wake them. Whatever the teacher is building in this sermon, it is clearly a house where sleepers are safe. Ahead of us waits the resting place many of you have been walking toward all night, whether you knew it or not. The teacher is about to look out at all that anxious humanity on the grass and speak about worry itself, about tomorrow and bread and the birds over the lake and the wild flowers on the very slope where the crowd is sitting. For now, stay here in the quiet room a moment longer. The door is closed. The show is over. No one is watching you anymore except the one who was always watching over you, which is a different thing entirely, as different as a spotlight from a nightlight. The Father who sees in secret has seen you all along, and what he sees he keeps. Chapter 6. Lilies, Sparrows, and Tomorrow. The sixth resting place is a meadow, and I have been saving it for you. Of all the ground on this mountain road, this is the gentlest. The slope eases here. The grass grows soft and deep, and the teaching that waits in this place has probably quieted more anxious hearts than any other words ever spoken. If you came to this night carrying worry, and most travelers do, this is the resting place that was prepared for you. But before the teacher speaks about worry, he speaks about treasure, and the one leads into the other like a path into a clearing. Follow the path with me. Do not lay up for yourselves treasures on earth, he says to the hillside, where moth and rust destroy, and where thieves break in and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust destroys, and where thieves do not break in and steal. For where your treasure is, there your heart will be also. Moth and rust and thieves, three quiet enemies, and between them they claim everything this world can store. Cloth was wealth in that age, and the moth ate it. Metal was wealth, and rust dissolved it. Whatever survived both, a thief could carry off in the night. The teacher is not scolding anyone here. He is simply describing the way you might warn a friend that a certain bridge is out. Everything stored down here is stored in a leaking building, and hearts follow treasure the way compass needles follow north. Store your treasure in a leaking building, and your heart has to live there too, anxious, listening for moths. Then comes a sentence that explains half the tiredness in the world. No one can serve two masters. You cannot serve God and money. Two masters. The word the old text uses for money here is mammon, wealth taken as a power, a boss, a lord. And notice the teacher does not say money is evil. He says it is a terrible master. Money makes a useful servant and a merciless employer, one that never grants a day off, never says enough, never once in all of history has told a worried man at midnight, "You can rest now, you have done well." Divided service, he is saying, is the most exhausting life there is. Trying to keep two thrones happy tears a soul down the middle. And it is right there, at the sorest point, that the teacher says the word, "Therefore I tell you, do not be anxious about your life." Hear how the sentence is built. Therefore, because your Father is your master and not mammon, because your treasure can be kept where nothing leaks, therefore the ground for anxiety is gone. This is not a command shouted at nervous people to feel differently. Anyone who has ever been told to just stop worrying knows how useless that is. This is a conclusion drawn gently from everything said before it. You have one master, and he is a father. Therefore, do not be anxious about your life, what you will eat or what you will drink, nor about your body, what you will put on. Is not life more than food, and the body more than clothing? And then, instead of arguing, the teacher does the loveliest thing in the whole sermon. He lifts his eyes and he points. Look at the birds of the air. Picture the moment. The hillside, the crowd in the grass, the lake below turning gold in the late light. And over the water, birds, wheeling and dipping the way they have every evening since the world was young. Whole lives spent without a single granary to their name, the teacher says. They neither sow nor reap nor gather into barns, and yet your heavenly Father feeds them. Are you not of more value than they? Your heavenly Father feeds them. Not the ecosystem sustains them, though it does. The teacher looks at the ordinary economy of nature and sees a father's hand opening every morning. Every wild bird that ever survived a winter did so, in his telling, as a guest at a table set by God. And then the question, asked so softly it hardly needs voicing, are you not worth more than they? Then he adds a line with a small smile hidden in it, I have always thought. And which of you, by being anxious, can add a single hour to his span of life? There it is, the uselessness of worry, stated once and never labored. All those midnight hours of rehearsing disasters, and not one of them has ever added an hour to anyone's life, or an inch to anyone's stature, or a single loaf to anyone's table. Worry is the one labor that produces nothing. It is not preparation. It is not love. It only feels like work because it is so tiring. And then the flowers. And why are you anxious about clothing? Consider the lilies of the field, how they grow. They neither toil nor spin, yet I tell you, even Solomon, in all his glory, was not arrayed like one of these. Consider the lilies. The word consider is slow. It means look closely, study, give them your attention, the way a scholar gives attention to a text. And the flowers he pointed to were almost certainly right there, the wild anemones and crocuses that flood the Galilean hillsides, scarlet and purple and white, growing in the very grass the crowd was sitting on. Some of his listeners were probably touching them as he spoke. Even Solomon in all his glory. Solomon, the richest king in Israel's memory, whose robes were legend, whose court dazzled visiting queens. And the teacher says, hold one wildflower next to all of that, and the wildflower wins. No loom ever matched a petal. The finest thing on that whole hillside was not worn by anyone. It grew there, free, unearned, and by the thousands. But if God so clothes the grass of the field, which today is alive and tomorrow is thrown into the oven, will he not much more clothe you, O you of little faith? O you of little faith! Hear the tone rightly. It is not a rebuke thundered from a distance. It is the tenderness of someone speaking to loved ones who cannot quite believe they are loved. Little faith is still faith. He does not say, O you of no faith. He gathers the anxious just as they are, faith the size of a mustard seed, and points them, one more time, to the evidence blooming all around their feet. So then, he says, do not be anxious, asking what shall we eat, or what shall we drink, or what shall we wear. Your heavenly Father knows that you need them all. And then the sentence that reorders everything. But seek first the kingdom of God and his righteousness, and all these things will be added to you. Seek first, not seek only. Notice, the needs are real, and the Father knows them, and nothing in this teaching pretends that bread does not matter. The teaching is about order. Put first things first, and the second things ride along. Put second things first, and you lose the peace and, sooner or later, the joy of the second things too. A heart aimed at the kingdom travels light. A heart aimed at securing tomorrow carries tomorrow on its back all day, and tomorrow is too heavy for anyone. Which brings us to the last sentence of the chapter, and I want to set it down before you like a stone worn smooth. Because of everything the teacher said on that hillside, this may be the sentence most made for the hour you are in right now. Therefore do not be anxious about tomorrow, for tomorrow will be anxious for itself. Sufficient for the day is its own trouble. One day at a time, that is the whole of it. The teacher does not promise a life without trouble. He says it plainly. Each day has trouble in it. Sufficient trouble, enough. What he forbids is the borrowing. Tonight, in beds all over the world, people are suffering troubles that do not exist yet, rehearsing conversations that may never happen, paying interest on debts that may never come due. Worry is borrowing tomorrow's trouble at a cruel rate of interest and carrying it tonight, when tonight was given to you for rest. I believe this teaching survives because it does not argue with the anxious mind. It redirects the anxious eye. Argument cannot calm a worried heart in the small hours. Every worrier knows the futility of debating themselves in the dark. So the teacher does not debate. He says, look at the birds. Consider the lilies. He treats creation as a room full of quiet evidence, left there on purpose, so that any sleepless soul in any century could look out a window and be reminded, the world is not running on your worry. It never was. It runs on a faithfulness older than the mountains, and that faithfulness has never once missed a morning. And there is one more thing, the deepest thing, and then the meadow can have you. Behind every line of this teaching stands a single word, and the word is Father. Your heavenly Father feeds them. Your Father knows what you need. The whole argument against anxiety rests not on positive thinking, not on the odds being good, but on a relationship. Children in a good house do not lie awake, wondering whether there will be breakfast. Not because they have checked the pantry, but because they know who is in the house. The teacher's cure for worry, at bottom, is not a technique. It is a Father, and the slow, nightly practice of remembering that he is in the house. So do the small assignment this meadow gives, the only homework of the night. Tomorrow is not yours to carry. It never was. It belongs to the one who is already there, standing in it, the way he stands in every day before his children arrive. Hand it over, the whole invisible bundle of it, and take tonight in exchange. The light is nearly gone from the lake now. The birds have settled. The wild flowers have closed for the night, unworried, unhurried, dressed better than kings and fast asleep on the hillside. Ahead of us, the sermon gathers toward its ending. 2 roads will open in the dark, and 2 builders will raise 2 houses, and a storm is coming that will prove which one stands. But that is for the next rest. This one is not finished with you yet. Sufficient for the day was its trouble, and the day is over. The birds are fed. The lilies are clothed. The Father is in the house. Rest now, you of little faith, which is faith enough. Tomorrow is already in better hands than yours. Chapter 7. 2 roads, 2 houses. The 7th resting place sits at the top of the sermon itself. We have been climbing through it for 4 rests now, and you can feel the ground beginning to gather, the way a long piece of music gathers before its final chords. The night has fully arrived on the hillside. The teacher's voice is the only sound moving over the grass, and what remains of the sermon is his closing counsel, the words he chose to leave ringing in their ears on the walk home. He begins with a mirror, and he holds it up so gently that the crowd is smiling before they realize the mirror is facing them. Judge not, that you be not judged. For with the judgment you pronounce you will be judged, and with the measure you use it will be measured to you. The measure you use. Every marketplace in Galilee ran on measures, scoops and baskets and balance scales, and everyone listening had, at some point, suspected a merchant of using 2 sets of them. A generous measure for what he took in, a skimpy one for what he gave out. And the teacher says, that is exactly how the human heart judges. We weigh our own failings on the forgiving scale, all context and good intentions, and we weigh our neighbor's failings on the strict one, no context, no mercy. 1 person, 2 measures. And then he makes the crowd laugh. I am convinced of it, and I will tell you why in a moment. Why do you see the speck that is in your brother's eye, but do not notice the log that is in your own eye? How can you say to your brother, let me take the speck out of your eye, when there is the log in your own eye? A speck and a log, a grain of sawdust and a roof beam. Picture the scene as his listeners would have, a man with an entire timber jutting from his face, leaning in carefully, squinting, offering to perform delicate eye surgery on his neighbor. It is a cartoon. It is deliberately absurd. And remember who is drawing it. Jesus grew up in a builder's household in Nazareth. He had carried beams like that. He knew their weight and their length. And he chose the biggest object in his own workshop for the joke. The laughter, though, is doing surgery of its own, because everyone on that hillside, in the same instant they laughed at the man with the beam, felt the beam in their own eye. That is how the teacher corrects people, not by grinding them down, but by letting them catch their own reflection at the exact angle where it becomes ridiculous, and then showing the way forward. First, take the log out of your own eye, he says, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your brother's eye. The goal, notice, was never to ignore the speck. Your brother's eye still matters. The goal is clear sight, and clear sight always begins at home. Then the sermon turns, and the voice softens into pure invitation. Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and it will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, and the one who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks it will be opened. Ask, seek, knock. 3 verbs, each one slightly bolder than the last. Asking is words. Seeking is movement. Knocking is standing at the very door, expecting it to open. And in the old language, these are continuing verbs: keep asking, keep seeking, keep knocking. This is not a vending machine promise, 1 coin, 1 prize. It is a description of a relationship in motion, a child who keeps coming back to the same door because the child knows who lives behind it. And then, in case anyone still pictured a reluctant God behind that door, the teacher reaches for the most disarming argument he ever made. He points the crowd at themselves. Which one of you, if his son asks him for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for a fish, will give him a serpent? If you then, who are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father who is in heaven give good things to those who ask him? Feel the warmth of that reasoning. You, he says, with all your flaws, with the log still fresh in your eye, even you would never mock your own hungry child. A loaf and a stone looked alike on a Galilean table. A dried fish and a snake could look alike. But no father alive swaps the gift for the cruel imitation. And if broken human love can be trusted that far, how much more the love it is a copy of? How much more? Hold those 3 words. They are the engine of the whole prayer life the teacher is describing. Every good thing you have ever done for someone you love is a rough sketch, and the original is better. And then, as if to fold the entire sermon into a sentence you could carry in one hand, he gives them the rule the world would never forget. So whatever you wish that others would do to you, do also to them, for this is the law and the prophets. The golden rule, later generations called it. Teachers before him had offered its shadow: do not do to others what you hate. That form is wise, and it is also finished the moment you do nothing. The teacher turns it from a fence into a road. Whatever you wish others would do for you, go and do it for them. Take the kindness you are waiting for, and be the first to give it away. And this, he says, is the law and the prophets. In that one sentence, the whole ancient teaching becomes something to practice. Now the sermon begins to end, and the teacher does something that marks him as an honest shepherd. He does not close with a lullaby. He closes with a choice. Enter by the narrow gate, for the gate is wide and the way is easy that leads to destruction, and those who enter by it are many. For the gate is narrow and the way is hard that leads to life, and those who find it are few. 2 roads, one broad and easy, crowded and well lit, no decision required, the road you end up on by simply drifting. One narrow, found rather than stumbled onto, asking something of the traveller at every stage. The teacher never once pretended his way was the easy one. But mark where each road goes. The easy road leads away from life. The narrow road leads into it. And a narrow gate, remember, is still an open gate. He is standing at it, saying, "Enter," to everyone on the hillside, to the few, and to anyone from among the many who turns. He warns them, too, about voices along the road. "Beware of false prophets," he says, "who come in sheep's clothing. You will recognize them by their fruits. Not by their volume, not by their charm, not even by their impressive works. By their fruit, the slow, honest evidence of what their lives actually grow. Grapes do not come from thorn bushes," he says. Time tells the truth about every tree. And then the ending. One last picture, and he built it out of his own trade. "Everyone then who hears these words of mine and does them will be like a wise man who built his house on the rock. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat on that house. But it did not fall, because it had been founded on the rock. And everyone who hears these words of mine and does not do them will be like a foolish man who built his house on the sand. And the rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew and beat against that house, and it fell, and great was the fall of it." Two builders. And here is the detail that matters most, so gather it in slowly. The two houses, in the story, may have looked identical. Same walls, same roof line, same pleasant view of the valley. In dry weather, no passerby could tell them apart. The difference was entirely underground, in the one place nobody sees, in what each builder had done before the visible work began. One had dug down to rock. One had built on the smooth, convenient sand of a dry streambed, the kind of ground that looks fine all summer. And the storm came to both. Read that again, because the teacher says it twice, deliberately, the same words for each house. The rain fell, and the floods came, and the winds blew. He does not promise the obedient a life without weather. The storm in this story is not a punishment. It is simply the forecast for every life on every road. What the foundation decides is not whether the storm comes. It decides what is still standing on the morning after. Hears these words of mine and does them. That is the rock. Not hears and admires, not hears and agrees warmly and walks home unchanged. Does them. The sermon we have spent 4 resting places inside was never meant to be beautiful scenery. It was meant to be bedrock, dug into, built on, lived. The mercy practiced. The enemy prayed for. The worry handed over, one tomorrow at a time. Every small obedience is another course of stone laid below the waterline of your life, invisible to the neighbors, decisive in the flood. And notice what the wise man's wisdom actually was. It was not brilliance. It was not strength. The storm did not care how clever either builder was. The wisdom was entirely in what he chose to build on, which means the deepest question of a life is not how impressive is the house, but what is under it. And that question, unlike so much else, is one every single person gets to answer. Nobody chooses their storms. Everybody chooses their rock. The first of the 5 mountains of words is behind us. The crowds rise from the grass in the dark and begin to drift down toward their villages, carrying sentences that are still being carried tonight, on this hillside of ours, by you. Ahead, the road descends for a while. The teacher will come down the mountain and move through the towns, healing, and then he will gather 12 unlikely men, one of them our ledger keeper, and send them out with words made for frightened travelers. But this rest closes the way Matthew closed it, with the crowd's own astonishment, and it is a good sentence to sleep on. And when Jesus finished these sayings, the crowds were astonished at his teaching, for he was teaching them as one who had authority, and not as their scribes. The sermon is over, and the night holds it. Somewhere below the hill, in the dark, 2 houses stand side by side, and only heaven knows what is under them. You have heard these words tonight. That is the hearing. Let tomorrow bring the small quiet doing. The rain will come when it comes. The rock was never going anywhere. Chapter 8. Sent out like sparrows. The 8th resting place is a doorway, and 12 men are standing in it, about to be sent out. The road has come down from the Sermon Mount now, and for a while it runs level through the towns. Matthew fills these chapters with healings, one after another. A leper, a centurion servant, a paralyzed man carried to him on a bed, 2 blind men following and calling out in the road. And over all this moving and mending, the gospel sets one sentence like a lamp in a window. When he saw the crowds, he had compassion for them, because they were harassed and helpless, like sheep without a shepherd. Harassed and helpless. The old words carry the picture of something torn and thrown down, a flock scattered on a hillside, with no one to gather it. That is what the teacher saw when he looked at a crowd, not an audience, not a project. Sheep, tired ones, and his response was not a lecture but an ache. The gospel says he had compassion, and the word in the old language is physical, a feeling in the depths of the body, the way sorrow and love actually arrive. Then he turned to his disciples and said, "The harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. Pray earnestly to the Lord of the harvest to send out laborers." And then, having told them to pray for laborers, he did the thing the teacher so often does. He made them the answer to their own prayer. And he called to him his 12 disciples and gave them authority. Matthew lists the 12 by name, and I want to read part of that list slowly, because our night's quiet thread runs right through the middle of it. Simon, who is called Peter, and Andrew his brother, James the son of Zebedee, and John his brother, Philip and Bartholomew, Thomas, and Matthew the tax collector. Matthew the tax collector. Did you hear it? Every gospel gives a list of the 12, but only this gospel attaches that label to Matthew's name. Mark does not add it. Luke does not add it. Only here. And whatever one concludes about who held the pen, that small choice is quietly moving. Someone, setting down the honor roll of the apostles, came to this name and kept the old occupation attached. The tax collector, as if to say, let the record show what he was when he was called. And that tells you what kind of company this was. In the same list stands Simon the Zealot, a man whose very designation suggests loyalties that may once have placed him far from anyone who collected for Rome. In any ordinary room, those 2 men keep their distance. Under this commission, they belong to the same 12. Whatever else the kingdom was doing, it was seating people at the same table who had no earthly reason to share one. So the teacher sends them out, and this is the second of the 5 great discourses in this gospel, the second mountain on our map, though it was spoken in no high place at all. Instructions for travelers given at the level of the road. And what strikes you first is how light he packs them. Acquire no gold, nor silver, nor copper for your belts, he says. No bag for your journey, nor 2 tunics, nor sandals, nor a staff. They are to go out with almost nothing, guests of the road, dependent on the kindness of the houses that receive them. And when you enter a house, he says, greet it, and let your peace come upon it. They are not traveling as salesmen or soldiers. They are traveling as peace, on foot, door to door. But the teacher is an honest sender, and here the sermon turns sober. Behold, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. So be wise as serpents and innocent as doves. Sheep among wolves. He does not soften the arithmetic. Some doors will not open. Some towns will not listen. He speaks plainly of trouble ahead, of standing before councils and governors, of households divided over him. This road, he tells them, will cost, and it is precisely here, into that honest forecast, that he sets the 3 sentences this resting place is named for. 3 times, close together, the same command. Have no fear of them. Do not fear. Fear not, therefore. Count them with me as they pass, like 3 lanterns hung along a dark stretch of road. The first, have no fear of them, for nothing is covered that will not be revealed, or hidden that will not be known. Do not fear the schemers and the slanderers, he is saying, because every lie has a shelf life. Every hidden right thing will come to light. You can afford to be misunderstood for a while when you know the whole story gets told in the end. The second lantern hangs deeper in. Do not fear those who can harm the body but cannot touch the soul, he says. There is a limit, a hard boundary, on what any enemy can actually reach. The innermost room of a person, the soul held by God, has one keyholder, and it is not the wolves. Fear God rather than men, he tells them, and in his mouth that is not a darker fear replacing a lighter one. It is one great reverence, swallowing 100 small panics, the way the sun swallows lamplight. And then the third, and it is the one I want to lay on your pillow, because the teacher reaches for the smallest thing in the market. Are not 2 sparrows sold for a penny? And not one of them will fall to the ground apart from your Father. But even the hairs of your head are all numbered. Fear not, therefore. You are of more value than many sparrows. 2 sparrows for a penny. The cheapest life for sale in any town, the small brown bird nobody counted. And the teacher says, your Father counts them. Not one of them falls, not one small unnoticed ending anywhere in the world, apart from him. And then he goes smaller still. The hairs of your head are all numbered. Not counted once, long ago, but numbered, kept in current inventory, an attention so fine it borders on the comical, and I believe the teacher meant the smile. He is speaking to people about to walk into wolf country, and he arms them with sparrows and arithmetic, as if to say, the Father's eye does not skim. If his attention reaches the sparrow and the single hair, then nothing about you, no step of your sending, no fall you will ever take, happens off his record. There is the bookkeeper's word again, record. And it is worth pausing on how this teaching might have landed on one particular man in that doorway. Take this as one listener's imagining, nothing more. Matthew had spent his working life putting prices on things. Goods, loads, livelihoods, everything that passed his booth reduced to a number. He knew exactly what the world's ledgers did with small things. They rounded them off. 2 sparrows a penny, throw in an extra bird for 2 pennies. The small stuff is not worth a line of ink. And now his teacher tells him heaven keeps the opposite kind of book. Nothing rounded off. Nothing beneath notice. The small, the cheap, the overlooked, each entered by name. For a man whose profession was pricing, it must have been like hearing arithmetic redeemed. The sending sermon closes with promises about welcome, that whoever receives these travelers receives the teacher himself, and that even a cup of cold water given to a little one will not lose its reward. Even a cup of cold water is in the book. Then Matthew sets down his quiet formula when Jesus had finished instructing his 12 disciples, and the second mountain is behind us. Maybe you are being sent into something tomorrow. Most people are. A hard conversation. A long shift. A week that looks, from tonight, like wolf country. Then, take the 3 lanterns with you, in order. The truth outlasts the lies. The innermost you is beyond reach of harm, and the eye that numbers sparrows is on your road. The 12 are out on the roads in the dark now, carrying peace to doorways. One of them, a former tax collector, is learning that heaven's books are kept in mercy. And the last word of this rest belongs to the teacher, spoken over every traveler since. Fear not, therefore. You are of more value than many sparrows. Chapter 9. The Easy Yoke. The 9th resting place is the one I promised you at the bottom of the mountain. We are at the middle of the road now. 8 rests behind us, 6 ahead. And this one is different from all the others, and I told you it would be, so let me keep my word. At every resting place so far, we have covered ground. Whole sermons, whole chapters, lists and journeys and storms, At this one, we will cover 3 sentences. That is all that waits here. 3 sentences, spoken by the teacher somewhere in the middle of this gospel, in the middle of a hard stretch of his own road. And I am going to walk you through them, the way you walk through a house you are thinking of living in. Slowly, every room, because of all the words in this book. These are the ones most purely addressed to a person lying awake at night, and I would rather you fall asleep inside them than hurry past. Here they are, whole, before anything else. Hear them once through, and then we will begin. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you, and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. Now, the first room. Come to me. Notice, before anything, what kind of sentence this is. It is not advice. It is not a technique. The teacher does not say, here are the 7 principles of rest, or try harder at peace. He says, come. The whole offer stands or falls on a person, himself. Rest, in these sentences, is not a state you achieve. It is someone you go to. That is either the boldest claim a teacher ever made, or it is the door out of exhaustion, and the sentence does not allow a third option. No mere instructor talks this way. Instructors say, follow my teachings. This one says, come to me. And who is invited? All who labor and are heavy laden. 2 kinds of tired, and the old words draw them precisely. To labor is the tiredness of what you do, the striving, the working, the endless producing and proving, and to be heavy laden is the tiredness of what you carry. Burdens, loaded on from outside or from long ago. Grief, worry, expectations, the weight of other people's needs or other people's verdicts. Some of you tonight are tired from laboring. Some are tired from carrying. Most, if we are honest, are both. Working hard all day and hauling weight all night. The invitation covers the whole territory. All who labor, all who are heavy laden, all. And there is a doorway into these sentences that most readers walk past. So let me show it to you, because it changes everything about how they sound. In the world of the teacher's first listeners, there was a well-known way of talking about religious life. It was called a yoke. The yoke of the law, the yoke of the commandments. Teachers spoke of taking these upon yourself, and the picture was of an ox fitted with its wooden crossbar for work. To join a rabbi's school was to take up that rabbi's yoke, his whole way of reading and living the law. So the yoke was not a strange image. It was the standard image for a life of obedience. But listen to how the teacher described what some of the experts had done with that yoke. Later, in this same gospel, he says it in the open. They tie up heavy burdens, hard to bear, and lay them on people's shoulders. Religion itself, in the wrong hands, had become one more weight. Rules stacked on rules. The constant measuring. The fear of never being enough for God, which is the heaviest load a soul can carry, because there is no evening when you get to set it down. Some of you know that weight from the inside. You grew up under a version of God who was mostly disappointed. You learned to read every hard day as a grade. And the cruelest part of such a burden is where it sends the tired. If God is the examiner, then the last place an exhausted failure wants to go is toward him. Now hear the second room of the teaching, with all of that in your ears. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me. My yoke. He does not abolish the picture. He does not say, throw off all yokes and drift. A yoke, after all, is how work gets done, and the teacher never promises a life without work or weight. What he offers is an exchange. Their yoke for his, the crushing load for a bearable one. And then he gives his credentials, and of all the things he could have said about himself, of all the words in all the languages, he chose these 2. For I am gentle and lowly in heart. Stop the whole night on that sentence. Here, in one of the clearest places where Jesus speaks directly about his own heart, this is what he says. Not, I am mighty, though he is. Not, I am wise, though the crowds were astonished at his wisdom. Gentle and lowly. That is his own self-portrait, the description he chose when the subject was what it is like to come near him. The most powerful person in the story reaches for the two least intimidating words in the language, and he aims them deliberately at the tired. Here is a thought I have carried for a long time, and I offer it to you as exactly that, one listener's conviction. I believe most exhaustion, at its root, is relational. We are worn out by the faces we imagine watching us. The critic, the examiner, the disappointed parent, the demanding boss, the world with its scales. And we assume, without ever saying it aloud, that the face at the very top of everything must be the sternest one of all. These three sentences exist to correct that assumption at the source. The face at the top, says the son who knows, is the gentlest face there is. Lowly in heart. Not looking down from a height, but already down here, at shoulder level, where the yokes are worn. And what does he promise to those who come? You will find rest for your souls. Rest for the soul. Not merely sleep for the body, though heaven knows the body's sleep matters, and this whole night is built to honor it. Rest for the soul is the deeper cure. It is what you feel when the verdict is finally in and the verdict is love. When the proving is over, when you stop performing for the imagined faces because the real face has already looked at you and stayed. That rest can hold steady through hard days and interrupted nights, because it does not depend on circumstances. It depends on whose yoke you are wearing. Those words, rest for your souls, are themselves an old promise made new. The prophet Jeremiah, hundreds of years before, had carried God's plea to a wandering people. Stand by the roads and look, and ask for the ancient paths, where the good way is, and walk in it, and find rest for your souls. The teacher takes up that ancient sentence and sets himself in the middle of it. The good way, the ancient path, the rest at the end of the asking, he says, is me. And then the third room, the last sentence. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. The word translated easy is worth holding up to the lamp. In the old language it can carry the sense of good, kind, serviceable, pleasant to bear. Many preachers across the years have loved to render it well-fitting, a yoke shaped to the wearer, and that is a warm and reasonable way to hear it, though I should tell you plainly it is an interpretation, not the only dictionary meaning. What the sentence itself guarantees is this: the yoke he gives is kind. It is good to bear. His yoke is not cruel, and his authority is never careless with the one who bears it. And there is one more picture that readers have found in this verse, and I will hand it to you carefully, labeled as what it is. In that world, oxen were often yoked in pairs, a stronger animal alongside a younger one, so the experienced neck bore the steadier weight while the learner found the rhythm. Some readers have pictured that here, a shared yoke with the teacher himself in the other side of the harness. Matthew does not explain the image that far, and I will not tell you the text says what it does not say. But the picture captures something the rest of the gospel says plainly in other ways. The one who calls you does not load you and leave. He walks the furrow too. The last sentence of this entire book, which we will reach at the summit, is his promise to be with his people always. Whatever the yoke means, it is worn in his company. That is the whole resting place. 3 sentences, an invitation, a self-portrait, and a kind guarantee. So now let me do what a guide should do at the middle of the mountain, and simply hold the door open. Maybe you came to this night, laboring, the kind of tired that sleep alone has not been fixing, because it lives below sleep. Maybe you came heavy-laden, carrying something you have carried so long you have stopped calling it a burden and started calling it yourself. And maybe, somewhere along the years, you got the idea that God was one more voice saying, do more, be more, prove it again tomorrow. Then hear the three sentences one last time, slowly, as the middle of the road holds still. They are the center of this gospel, and they were always meant for this hour. Come to me, all who labor and are heavy laden, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and lowly in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. There is no assignment at this resting place. Coming is the whole of it, and listening half asleep in the dark counts as coming. It always has. Ahead of us, when the road resumes, the teacher goes down to the shore and begins to tell stories, seeds and soil, treasure and pearls, the little parables of the kingdom. That is the 10th resting place, and it can wait as long as it needs to. For now, stay here. This is the rest inside the rest, the still point of the whole climb. The examiner you feared was never at the top of the mountain. The gentle one was. Lowly in heart, holding out a kind yoke, and keeping company with everyone who wears it. Set down what you carried up here. All of it. He is not weighing you. He is inviting you. Rest now for your body, and rest for your soul, which is what you really came for. The middle of the road is his, and so is the far side, and so are you. Chapter 10. Seeds in the Dark. The 10th resting place is a shoreline, and the teacher is sitting in a boat. The road has carried us down from the middle heights back to the edge of the lake, and something has changed in the way the teacher speaks. Matthew marks the day precisely. That same day Jesus went out of the house and sat beside the sea, and great crowds gathered about him, so that he got into a boat and sat down, and the whole crowd stood on the beach. Picture it from the water's side. The hills coming down to the shore make a natural theatre there, and sound carries over calm water the way it carries nowhere else. A voice from a boat, a few yards out on the stillness, can reach hundreds of people standing on the sand without ever being raised. So here is our third mountain of words, and let it be said honestly, this one was no mountain at all. It was a boat, rocking gently at anchor, with the lake for a floor. The map is ours. The teaching is his. And he told them many things in parables. Parable, little stories with doors in them. A sower, some soil, a seed, a pearl. Stories so simple a child could carry them home, and so deep that scholars are still lowering lamps into them 20 centuries later. And nearly every story in this discourse is about the same unlikely subject. Growing things. Seeds, fields, harvests, bread rising. The teacher looks out at that beach crowd, farmers and fishermen who fought the ground and the water for every meal, and he tells them the kingdom of heaven is like the thing they know best. Something planted, something that begins out of sight. Listen to the first and greatest of them, the one he told from the boat. A sower went out to sow, and as he sowed, some seeds fell along the path, and the birds came and devoured them. Other seeds fell on rocky ground, where they did not have much soil, and immediately they sprang up. But when the sun rose, they were scorched, and since they had no root, they withered away. Other seeds fell among thorns, and the thorns grew up and choked them. Other seeds fell on good soil and produced grain, some 100-fold, some 60, some 30. 4 soils, 1 sower, 1 seed. And when the disciples asked him privately what it meant, he opened the door himself, one of the few parables he ever explained outright. The seed is the word of the kingdom. The soils are hearts. The hard path is the heart the word cannot enter, snatched away before it settles. The rocky ground is the shallow enthusiasm that sprouts overnight and dies in the first hot week of trouble. No root, no depth. The thorny ground receives the word sincerely. But then, and hear how modern this sounds, the cares of the world and the deceitfulness of riches choke it. Not hatred, not persecution, just crowding. A heart so full of worry and wanting that the good seed never gets light. And then the good soil, the heart that hears and holds, and the yield is staggering. 100-fold. In that world, a farmer rejoiced over 7-fold and told his grandchildren about 10-fold. 100 was not good farming. It was a miracle wearing work clothes. May I tell you what I notice most in this story? Take it as one reader's observation. Notice how the sower sows. To modern ears, the sowing can sound almost extravagant. The seed reaches every kind of ground before any verdict is spoken over it. Path, rocks, thorns, good soil, the seed flies over all of it, as if the sower were more interested in sowing than in calculating. The word goes out to every heart, the hard and the shallow and the crowded alike, because the sower does not prejudge the soil. And here is the gentler secret underneath, the one worth falling asleep on. Soil is not a life sentence. A path can be broken up. Rocks can be cleared, thorns pulled, and every gardener knows the ground that grows best is often ground that was worked over after years of neglect. The parable is not a verdict on what kind of heart you are. It is an invitation about what kind of heart you may yet become, and the sower is still sowing. Then come the small parables, and they fall quickly, one after another, like seeds themselves. The kingdom of heaven is like a grain of mustard seed, the smallest of the garden seeds his listeners handled, and yet it grows into a tree so that the birds of the air come and make nests in its branches. The kingdom, he is saying, starts embarrassingly small. A dozen unimpressive men. A word here, a kindness there. Nothing an empire would notice. And it ends as shelter, with room in its branches, for the birds, for the wanderers, for everyone the storms have been chasing. The kingdom of heaven is like leaven that a woman took and hid in 3 measures of flour, till it was all leavened. Hid, notice. Yeast disappears into the dough. You cannot point to it. You cannot pick it back out. But leave it through the night, and by morning the whole batch has quietly risen. That is how the kingdom works in a life and in a world, not usually as thunder, as leaven, hidden, patient, working where no eye can watch it. And then 2 tiny stories about finding. The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and covered up. Then in his joy, he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field. Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant in search of fine pearls, who, on finding 1 pearl of great value, went and sold all that he had and bought it. 2 finders. One stumbles onto the treasure by accident, a laborer in someone else's field, his shovel striking wood. The other has been searching his whole life, a merchant who knows pearls, holding at last the one all the others were shadows of. Some people trip over the kingdom. Some hunt it for decades. The gospel makes room for both. But mark the one word the first story insists on: joy. In his joy he goes and sells everything. Nobody stands over that man demanding sacrifice. The selling is not the cost of the treasure. It is the celebration of it. He is not losing everything. He is trading up, and he knows it, and he cannot stop smiling all the way to the deed office. That is what real faith looks like from the inside, the teacher is saying. Not grim renunciation. A man who found something so good that everything else became easy to release. The discourse holds harder stories too, and I will name them honestly, because a night guide who edits the teacher is no guide at all. There is a parable of weeds sown among wheat by an enemy, and of a net that gathers fish of every kind, and both end with a sorting, a final separation of the true from the false, in language of harvest and fire that belongs to the old prophets. The teacher never pretended that evil is imaginary or that the sorting will never come. But notice, even there, what the farmer in the story commands. Let both grow together until the harvest. The servants want to rip the weeds out now, and the master says no, you will uproot wheat with them. Wait. Judgment, in these parables, is real, and it is reserved, kept out of our impatient hands, held for a wiser harvest day than ours. Until then, the field grows, mixed and mercifully unfinished. When Jesus had finished these parables, Matthew writes, he went away from there. The third mountain is behind us. And here is the gift I want you to carry from this shoreline, because it was built for the hour you are in. Every parable at this resting place trusts what happens out of sight. The seed disappears beneath the soil. The leaven works in the hidden middle of the dough. The treasure waits underground. Again and again, the kingdom's work begins where no one is watching. Nothing in these stories grows because an anxious observer stands over it. The growing is given, quietly, in secret, on a schedule no worried eye can hurry. You may feel, some seasons, that nothing in your life is moving. Prayers planted long ago with no green showing. Kindness sown into people who have not turned. Take the parable's word for it. The hidden season is still a growing season. And sleep itself, this very sleep you are sliding toward, is an act of trust in the God whose kingdom rises like leaven in the dark while the house rests. The boat rocks softly at its anchor. The crowd on the beach is thinning into the dusk, each listener carrying a story home like a seed in a pocket. Growing was never your job after dark. Let the night have the field. Chapter 11. The Lost Sheep and the 70 times 7. The 11th resting place is a house in Capernaum, and an argument has just walked through the door. The gospel sets the scene with disarming honesty. At that time, the disciples came to Jesus, saying, "Who is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven?" Who is the greatest? 12 grown men, hand-picked by the teacher, walking the roads of Galilee behind the humblest heart that ever lived. And the question simmering among them is rank. Who outranks whom? Who sits closest? Who matters most? Before we shake our heads at them, let us admit the question is not strange to us. It is the question underneath half the sleeplessness in the world. Where do I stand? How do I measure? Am I ahead or behind? The disciples only said out loud what most hearts ask in the dark. And the teacher's answer opens the fourth of the 5 great discourses, the tenderest of them all, spoken not on any mountain but inside a house. He does not lecture first. He reaches for someone, and calling to him a child, he put him in the midst of them. A child in the middle of the circle. In that world, children had no rank at all. They held no property, carried no titles, commanded no one. A child was the one person in the room with nothing to leverage. And the teacher stands this small, unranked person in the center of 12 status-hungry men and says, "Truly, I say to you, unless you turn and become like children, you will never enter the kingdom of heaven. Whoever humbles himself like this child is the greatest in the kingdom of heaven." The greatest is the one who stops climbing. The kingdom's ladder, it turns out, runs the other direction. And then the teacher goes further, and his voice, you can hear it in the text, grows protective. "Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me," he says. "And whoever causes one of these little ones to stumble, it would be better for him to have a millstone fastened around his neck and be drowned in the depth of the sea." Strong words. The strongest at this resting place. And I will not soften them, because their fierceness is love. The teacher stations himself between the small and the strong, permanently. "See that you do not despise one of these little ones," he says. Heaven does not. And then, to show them how heaven regards the small and the strayed, he tells a story you have known your whole life, even if you never knew where it lived. What do you think? If a man has 100 sheep, and one of them has gone astray, does he not leave the 99 on the mountains and go in search of the one that went astray? And if he finds it, truly, I say to you, he rejoices over it more than over the 99 that never went astray. 1 out of 100 can look, from a distance, like a manageable loss, a number small enough to absorb, but in this arithmetic, the 1 is not a percentage. The 1 has a face, and the teacher asks, What do you think? As if the answer were obvious, and then gives an answer that is only obvious to love. The shepherd goes, leaves the 99 safe on the heights, and goes in search of the one. The shepherd of this story does not dismiss the missing one as an acceptable loss. And when he finds it, the story does not say he scolds it. It says he rejoices. So, it is not the will of my Father who is in heaven that one of these little ones should perish. If you have ever felt like the one, strayed too far, gone too long, not worth the search, hear the story as it was told. That is not how this shepherd counts. Then the discourse turns to the hardest terrain at this resting place, and I want to walk it with you carefully, because many travelers carry wounds across it. Peter comes to the teacher with a question, and to be fair to Peter, he thinks he is being generous. Lord, how often will my brother sin against me, and I forgive him? As many as 7 times. 7 times. Peter appears to think 7 is a generous limit, and honestly, by the world's arithmetic, it is. 7 pardons for the same offender. Most of us stop counting long before that, because we stopped forgiving long before that. Jesus said to him, I do not say to you 7 times, but 70 times 7. 70 times 7. Some old manuscripts read 77 times, and either way, the point is not the product of the multiplication. The point is that anyone keeping count that high has stopped keeping count. The teacher takes Peter's ledger, the little book where offenses are tallied toward a limit, and he retires it. Forgiveness in the kingdom is not a quota. It is a climate. And then, so they would understand why, he tells the parable of the 2 debts, and it is one of the most piercing stories he ever told. A king settles accounts with his servants, and one is brought who owes 10,000 talents. Hear that number the way the first listeners did. A single talent was more than 15 years of a laborer's wages. 10,000 of them is a debt beyond absurdity, more than the tax revenue of whole provinces, a number chosen to be unpayable by anyone in any lifetime. The servant falls down and pleads for patience, promising to repay what no one could repay. And out of pity for him, the master of that servant released him and forgave him the debt. The whole mountain of it. Gone, in a sentence, at the king's own cost. And then that same servant walks out, finds a fellow servant who owes him 100 denarii, a few months' wages, a real debt, but a human-sized one, and seizes him by the throat. Pay what you owe. The fellow pleads with the very words the first man had just used, and he refuses, and has him thrown into prison. When the king hears of it, his question is the whole discourse in one line. Should not you have had mercy on your fellow servant, as I had mercy on you? What follows is my own way of holding this parable, and you may hold it differently. Its power is in its arithmetic of memory. The unforgiving servant was not cruel because the 100 denarii were imaginary. They were real. Real hurts are real. The parable never says otherwise. He was cruel because he had already forgotten the 10,000. He walked out of the throne room and left the memory of mercy inside it. And forgiveness, in this parable, flows from exactly that memory. It is not primarily a feat of willpower strained toward an offender. It is what begins to grow in a person who remembers, daily, the mountain of debt that was released over them at the king's own cost. And let me say one thing more, plainly, for anyone carrying a deep wound tonight. Forgiveness in this gospel is not pretending the debt was unreal. The harm happened, and heaven does not ask you to call it small. Forgiveness is refusing to claim final judgment as your own, because you yourself live by the mercy of the King. It is handing the case to the one judge who sees everything and owes nothing. And mark the difference the scriptures themselves keep. Forgiveness is commanded. Reconciliation and restored trust are built, and they require truth, repentance, and safety. The same discourse that says 70 times 7 also builds fences around the little ones and speaks of millstones. Nothing here sends anyone back into harm's way. What it offers instead is release from the collector's work. the endless midnight accounting of what you are owed. That ledger can be set down, not because the debt was false, but because the final accounting can be released into hands wiser than yours. Matthew closes the fourth discourse with his quiet formula, when Jesus had finished these sayings, and the road turned south. So here is the gift of this resting place, and it has two hands. In one hand, the sheep. If you are the strayed one tonight, you are not a rounding error. You have a face, and the shepherd knows it, and the search does not frighten him. In the other hand, the ledger. If you are the wounded one tonight, holding an account someone truly owes, you do not have to balance it before morning. The King has not forgotten your case, and he has not forgotten his mercy to you. Both are safe with him until morning and longer. The house in Capernaum is quiet now. The child has gone back to his mother. The argument about greatness had no answer left while the child was still standing in the middle. Count no debts tonight, neither the ones you owe, which mercy has met, nor the ones owed to you, which can rest in wiser hands than yours. Chapter 12. Questions on the Jerusalem Road. The 12th resting place is not a place at all. It is a stretch of moving road. The Gospel marks the turn plainly. Now when Jesus had finished these sayings, he went away from Galilee and entered the region of Judea beyond the Jordan. The lake country is behind him now. The boat, the hillside, the house in Capernaum, all of it receding. Ahead, up through the hill country, lies Jerusalem. And Matthew has already told us what the teacher knows about that city. Chapters earlier, the Gospel says he began to show his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem and suffer many things. He has been preparing them for this road for a long time, and still he walks it, steadily, toward the gates. So the air changes on this stretch. The light is lower. The teaching grows more searching. And as he travels, and then in the city itself, people press in with the questions they have been saving, the way people always bring their deepest questions to someone who is running out of time. 3 questions shape this stretch of the journey, and they are the oldest questions in the world. What must I do? What am I owed? And what matters most? The first was asked on the road. The last was asked days later, inside Jerusalem, in the shadow of the temple. We will carry all 3 tonight, because together they map the human heart. The first question comes from a rich young man. He approaches the teacher and asks, "Teacher, what good deed must I do to have eternal life?" Hear the shape of his question. What must I do? He is asking for an assignment, a price, one more achievement for a life that has collected them. And when the teacher points him to the commandments, the young man answers with what sounds like relief. All these I have kept. What do I still lack? What do I still lack? Now there is the sentence underneath his whole life. Here is a man who has everything, the money, the morals, the youth, the discipline, and he is still asking strangers what is missing. He has kept every rule and cannot feel finished. Some of you know that ache from the inside. The resume fills, the checkboxes check, and the lack does not move. Jesus said to him, "If you would be perfect, go, sell what you possess and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come, follow me." Notice, before anything else, that this is an invitation, not a formula. To other people, the teacher gave other words. To this man, he named the one thing standing between him and freedom, because love tells the truth about the particular chain. And the young man heard it, and could not. When the young man heard this, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. He went away sorrowful. It is one of the saddest sentences in the Gospel, and part of its sadness is what it reveals. He walked away, still owning everything, and sorrowful, which tells you who really owned whom. The possessions he could not release were holding him, not the other way around. His question could not be answered by adding one more achievement to the list. What he lacked was not another item for the ledger. It was the freedom to release what mastered him and to follow. And Jesus, watching him go, said to the disciples that it is hard for a rich person to enter the kingdom, easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle. The disciples were astonished. Many in their world could read wealth as a visible sign of God's favor. If even the blessed rich cannot enter, they asked, who then can be saved? And the teacher gave the answer that holds this whole road together. With man this is impossible, but with God all things are possible. Impossible with man. That is not a discouragement. It is a release. No human achievement, even wealth joined to moral seriousness, can make the impossible possible. The kingdom must finally be received through what God does, the way we learned at the child's circle, with empty hands. What no one can do for themselves, God does. And then, as if to show them what that grace feels like from the inside, the teacher tells a story about wages, and it carries the second question. What am I owed? A master of a house goes out at dawn to hire laborers for his vineyard, and agrees with them for a denarius, the honest day's wage. He goes out again at the 3rd hour and hires more. Again at the 6th hour and the 9th. And then, at the 11th hour, 1 hour before quitting time, he finds men still standing idle in the marketplace, men nobody had wanted all day, and he sends even them into the vineyard. And when evening comes, the paymaster begins with the last. The 11th hour men, the 1 hour men, open their hands, and into each hand falls a full denarius, a whole day's wage for 60 minutes of work. And down the line it goes, the same coin for the 9th hour men and the 6th hour men, and finally for the dawn crew, who have watched all this with rising expectation, and who receive, exactly as agreed, 1 denarius. And on receiving it they grumbled at the master of the house, saying, These last worked only 1 hour, and you have made them equal to us, who have borne the burden of the day and the scorching heat. You have made them equal to us. There it is, the oldest complaint in the human heart. Not, I was underpaid, for he was not, but they were overpaid. And the master's answer is gentle and devastating at once. Friend, I am doing you no wrong. Did you not agree with me for a denarius? Am I not allowed to do what I choose with what belongs to me? Or do you begrudge my generosity? I will tell you how I have come to read this story, and you are free to read it otherwise. It offends everyone who hears it as economics, and heals everyone who hears it as grace. Because in the vineyard of the kingdom, the wage was never a wage. It was a gift, wearing a wage's clothing. And the 11th hour men are all of us, in the end. Whoever comes at dawn or at dusk, whoever wasted 60 years or 6, receives not a fraction of mercy, but the whole coin, the full denarius of being wanted, welcomed, and kept. If you have ever feared you came to God too late in the day, this story was told against your fear. The master is still going out to the marketplace at the 11th hour, looking for the ones nobody hired. And then the third question. By now the road has ended. The teacher has entered Jerusalem, and the days there are thick with challenges, questions designed as traps, tested in public, in the courts of the temple. Out of that contest comes one question that outlived all the others. A lawyer asks, Teacher, which is the great commandment in the law? 613 commandments, by the traditional count, lay in the scrolls. Which one crowns them? And the teacher answers with 2, joined so tightly that the centuries have never pried them apart. You shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, and with all your soul, and with all your mind. This is the great and first commandment, and a second is like it. You shall love your neighbor as yourself. On these 2 commandments depend all the law and the prophets. All the law and the prophets hanging from 2 nails, and both nails are love. Love God entirely. Love the person nearest you as yourself. The teacher did not invent either sentence. Both lay in the old scrolls, one in Deuteronomy, one in Leviticus. What he did was join them, permanently. You cannot, in his teaching, have the first without the second. Love for God that neglects the neighbor is noise. Love for neighbor that forgets, God runs dry. Together, they are the whole road. And with that answer, the three questions close a circle. What must I do? Asked the young man, and went away sorrowful, still doing. What am I owed? Asked the dawn workers, and grumbled, still counting. And the last word over all of it is neither doing nor counting. It is loving, which is the one thing that can never be earned or counted, only given and received. Ahead of us, the teacher will climb the Mount of Olives in the evening light and sit down opposite the temple and speak his final collected discourse about lamps and waiting and a long-expected homecoming. The summit ridge of our night is close now. Perhaps you brought a question up this road yourself tonight. What must I do? What am I owed? What is missing? Lay them down here, where the young man's sorrow and the worker's grumbling were both answered by the same patient voice. Love, given whole. Love, received whole. The full denarius pressed into the latest, emptiest hand. The 11th hour is not too late. It never was. Chapter 13. Lamps in the Waiting Night. The 13th resting place is a hillside again, and the wheel of our night has come full circle. The teacher began his teaching on a mountain in Galilee, seated with his disciples gathered close. Now, near the end, Matthew seats him on a mountain once more, and this time the mountain is real ground under him. As he sat on the Mount of Olives, the disciples came to him privately. Across the valley, the temple stands in the evening light, its stones catching the last of the sun. And the disciples, troubled by things the teacher has been saying about days to come, ask him the question every generation has asked in the dark. When? What will be the sign? How will we know? What follows is the fifth and final discourse in this gospel, the last of the great collected teachings. And I will tell you honestly how we will walk it, because honesty is our way on this road. In these chapters, the teacher speaks of hard things ahead, of troubles and endings, in the vivid language of the old prophets, sun and moon, and shaken heavens. Christians have discussed for 20 centuries how those images unfold, and good and faithful readers hold different views. And settling that discussion is not the errand of a sleep-worn night. What I want to show you instead is what the teacher himself kept pressing his listeners toward. Because here is the remarkable thing about this whole discourse. Every time the disciples reach for a date, the teacher hands them a lamp. Concerning that day and hour, he says plainly, no one knows, not even the angels of heaven, nor the Son, but the Father only. No one knows. He says it without embarrassment. And having closed the door on calculation, he opens a different door entirely, and the word over that door is watch. Stay awake. Be ready. Not the wakefulness of fear pacing the floor, the wakefulness of expectation, a house kept warm for someone beloved who is surely coming home. And to show them what that readiness looks like, he tells stories. Gentle, homely, nighttime stories. A fig tree, 10 young women with lamps, 3 servants with a trust. Listen to them one by one, for they are the true summit of this discourse. First, the fig tree, and it is barely a story at all, more a glance out the window. From the fig tree learn its lesson. As soon as its branch becomes tender and puts out its leaves, you know that summer is near. Around the Mount of Olives, fig trees stood everywhere. And unlike the olive, the fig drops its leaves in winter. All through the cold months it stands grey and bare, the deadest-looking tree on the hillside. And then, late in spring, the bare wood softens. The branch grows tender. Small green leaves unfold, and every farmer knows, without checking a calendar, summer is near. The teacher points at that yearly quiet miracle and says, learn from it. Bare seasons are not final seasons. The tree that looks finished is keeping time, and the sap knows things the grey branches do not show. If your life is in a winter right now, stripped and waiting, the fig tree was set beside this discourse for you. Watch the branch, Summer has never once failed to come. Then the 10 lamps, and this story is made of wedding light. Then the kingdom of heaven may be compared to 10 virgins who took their lamps and went to meet the bridegroom. A village wedding in that world happened at night, and it began with waiting. The bridegroom would come for the celebration at some unannounced hour, and the young women of the wedding party waited with oil lamps to escort him in with light and song. In the story, 5 are wise and bring flasks of extra oil. 5 are foolish and bring only what is in their lamps. And then comes the detail I love most, the mercy hidden in the middle of the parable. The bridegroom delays, and all 10 grow drowsy, and all 10 sleep. All 10. The wise sleep too. Hear that clearly, because this discourse about watchfulness is not a sermon against sleeping. The wise virgins are not commended for staying awake. They sleep soundly, heads on their arms, lamps beside them, because their preparation was already made. Their readiness was not in their eyelids. It was in their oil. And at midnight the cry comes, the bridegroom is here, and the prepared ones simply rise, trim their lamps, and walk into the feast, while the unprepared are away at the merchants, knocking on closed shops in the dark. Here is one way to hold this story, and it is mine, so weigh it freely. The oil is everything this whole gospel has been pouring into us, resting place by resting place. The quiet practices, the secret prayer, the mercy shown, the worry surrendered, the small obediences laid like stone below the waterline. None of it flashy. All of it oil. And readiness for God, it turns out, is not vigilance strained through sleepless nights. It is a life quietly supplied, day by ordinary day. So that when the beautiful interruption comes, at midnight or at morning, you can rise and trim your lamp and go into the joy. The watchful, in this parable, are allowed to sleep. Let that word tuck you in tonight. Preparation is the pillow of the prepared. Then, the third story, the talents. A master, going on a journey, entrusts his property to his servants. To one, 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, each according to his ability. And a talent, remember, was a fortune, years of wages in a single trust. The 5-talent servant trades and gains 5 more. The 2-talent servant gains 2. And the 1-talent servant, the story says, went and dug in the ground and hid his master's money. When the master returns and settles accounts, the first 2 servants hear the words, "Every human heart was made to hear. Well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. Enter into the joy of your master." The same words, notice, for the 5-talent man and the 2-talent man. The amounts differ. The commendation does not. Heaven grades faithfulness, not totals. But the third servant comes with his shovel and his excuse. "Master, I knew you to be a hard man, so I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground." One way to hear the servant's words, and it is the way I find most searching, is that fear had distorted his picture of the master, and the distorted picture produced a buried life. Not laziness first, fear first, and underneath the fear, a portrait of a hard master that the master's own generosity to the others does not confirm. What we believe about the face at the top on this hearing decides whether we bury our lives or spend them. And everything this gospel has shown us, the gentle and lowly heart, the sparrow-counting father, the shepherd who goes in search, has been correcting that fearful portrait, one resting place at a time. And then the discourse rises to its final scene, the last public teaching of the teacher in this gospel, and it is not a riddle. It is a homecoming, with the king gathering the nations, and the standard by which lives are weighed turns out to be shockingly, beautifully small. "For I was hungry, and you gave me food. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you welcomed me. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me." And the righteous, bewildered, ask, "Lord, when When did we see you hungry, or thirsty, or a stranger?" And the king answers with the sentence that has sent mercy into every corner of the world for 2,000 years. "Truly, I say to you, as you did it to one of the least of these my brothers, you did it to me." The least of these. Christians have long heard this scene as a summons to meet the king himself in the hungry, the stranger, the sick, and the imprisoned. Some interpreters understand the least of these, my brothers, more narrowly, as the vulnerable messengers of Jesus, received or rejected along the roads of the world. The conversation between those readings is old and serious, and a night journey is not the place to settle it. But hear what stands firm on either reading. However broadly or narrowly we understand the least of these, the King binds our treatment of the vulnerable to our treatment of him. No one at the homecoming is commended for calculating dates. They are commended for cups of water and open doors, most of which they had entirely forgotten. The watchful life, this whole discourse concludes, is not a life spent scanning the sky. It is a life spent loving the person in front of you. And when Jesus had finished all these sayings, Matthew writes, "And with the word all, the fifth mountain is complete." 5 discourses gathered with a bookkeeper's care, ending in lamplight and mercy. Ahead of us lies the 14th resting place, and it is an upper room in the city, a table set for a Last Supper, and beyond it, a garden of olive trees. We will walk there gently. But the Mount of Olives is quiet now. The temple lights are kindling across the valley, one by one, like the wedding lamps. You do not know the day or the hour of anything, and you were never asked to. You were asked to keep a little oil, and love the nearest face, and let the fig tree teach you about winters. The delay is not abandonment. The bridegroom still comes. Rest now, wise and drowsy, lamp beside the bed. Even the ready ones were allowed to sleep. Chapter 14. The Table and the Garden. The 14th resting place is an upper room, and a table is set inside it. The 5 great discourses are behind us now. The public teaching is finished, the crowds are gone, and the gospel draws in close, the way a story draws in close near its heart. It is the evening of the Passover, the old feast of deliverance, when every household in Israel gathered to remember the night God brought their ancestors out of slavery. Lamb and unleavened bread and cups of wine, and the ancient retelling. And in a borrowed upper room in Jerusalem, the teacher reclines at table with the 12. Now, as they were eating, Jesus took bread, and after blessing it broke it and gave it to the disciples, and said, "Take, eat, this is my body." And he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink of it, all of you, for this is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." Every teaching we have gathered on this whole mountain road, he now gathers into his 2 hands. Bread broken and given, a cup poured and shared. The teacher who spoke 5 great discourses chooses, on his last evening, to say the deepest thing without a sermon at all. This is my body. This is my blood of the covenant, poured out for many, for the forgiveness of sins. Whatever else that holy sentence holds, and the church has knelt before it for 20 centuries, hear the direction of it. Poured out, given, for you, the grace we have met at every resting place, the shepherd's search, the king's cancelled debt, the full denarius in the latest hand, all of it was heading here, to a table, into open hands. And notice one more thing about that table, because Matthew preserved it unflinchingly. Around it sat 12 men, and the teacher knew them entirely. He had just said, quietly, that one of them would betray him. He knew that Peter, warm-hearted, sure of himself, would deny even knowing him before the rooster crowed. He knew the rest would scatter into the dark. He looked around that table at betrayal and denial and desertion, all of it hours away, and to those men, exactly those men, he passed the bread and the cup. The table was not set for the worthy. It never has been. It was set for the failing, by the one who loved them anyway. And he sang with them. The Gospel adds one line that undoes me every time I read it. And when they had sung a hymn, they went out to the Mount of Olives. The Passover psalms of thanksgiving, sung in an upper room, hours before the garden. He went into the dark with a song still in his throat. And so we come to the garden, and I will lower my voice for it, because this is the holiest ground of our whole night's walk. Then Jesus went with them to a place called Gethsemane. Gethsemane. The name means oil press, and the place was an olive grove on the lower slopes of the Mount of Olives, where the fruit of the trees was crushed until the oil ran. The Gospel does not point out the meaning of the name. It does not have to. And taking with him Peter and the 2 sons of Zebedee, he began to be sorrowful and troubled. Then he said to them, "My soul is very sorrowful, even to death. Remain here and watch with me." Hear what is happening in those sentences, because nothing in the ancient world prepares you for them. The teacher, who stilled storms with a word, who spoke to crowds with unshakable authority, is now openly, unashamedly, in anguish, sorrowful even to death. And he does not hide it from his friends. He asks for them. Remain here. Watch with me. The Son of God, in his darkest hour, wanted company. If ever you have needed permission to say to someone, "Stay with me, I am struggling tonight," the garden gives it. Sorrow shared is not weakness. The strongest soul in the story asked 3 friends to sit up with him. And going a little farther, he fell on his face and prayed, saying, "My Father, if it be possible, let this cup pass from me. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will." Every phrase of that prayer is a lamp for someone. My Father, first, even here, the old warm address, the relationship holding when everything else is breaking. If it be possible, let this cup pass, the honest asking, the request not to suffer, spoken without shame. The teacher himself prayed for the hard thing to be taken away. So may you. Honest reluctance laid before God is not a failure of faith. It is faith talking. And then the turning, the hinge on which the whole prayer swings. Nevertheless, not as I will, but as you will. He does not pretend to want the cup. He entrusts himself to the Father anyway, will folded into will, like a hand placed inside a stronger hand in the dark. And then he rises from prayer and comes back to his 3 friends and finds them asleep. He wakes them, and he asks Peter a question that must have stung for the rest of Peter's life. "So, could you not watch with me 1 hour?" Hear the honesty of the scene, because the Gospel gives us both notes, and both are true. There is real disappointment in that question. He had asked 1 hour of them, 1 hour of company in his anguish, and they could not give it. The teacher does not pretend otherwise, and neither will I. But listen to the very next sentence, because in the same breath as the correction comes the compassion. "Watch and pray that you may not enter into temptation. The spirit indeed is willing, but the flesh is weak." The spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak. He names their failure, and then he names the reason for it, and the naming itself is gentle. He knew they loved him. He knew they meant to stay awake. He knew their bodies were shattered by grief and fear. So the rebuke and the mercy arrive together, the way they always do in this teacher. "Could you not watch 1 hour? And, I know the flesh is weak." He tells them the truth about what they failed to do, and the truth about why. And he does not take back the calling from either truth. 3 times he goes away to pray the same prayer. 3 times he returns and finds their eyes heavy with sleep. And the 3rd time, the hour of watching is over, because the betrayer is at the gate. Let me be careful here, and say what the text says. The disciples failed to keep watch. The Gospel does not excuse that, and I will not dress it up as harmless. The teacher asked, and they slept. But here is what the rest of the story shouts over that failure. It did not exhaust his love. Not one of those sleeping men was crossed off. Within weeks, those same 3 drowsy failures were the pillars of his church. The failure was real, and the correction was real, and the keeping was greater than both. If you carry a quiet guilt tonight about a time you were not enough for someone you loved, the night you were too tired, the hour you missed, then take the garden's whole truth, not half of it. The falling short mattered, and it was not the end. With this teacher, it is never the end. The soldiers came, with torches through the trees. The friends scattered, as he said they would. And the teacher, who could have asked for legions of angels, went with the guards quietly, because, he said, the scriptures must be fulfilled. This gospel does not look away from what followed, the trials, the cross, the darkness at noon, and neither does our reverence. But the telling of that story in full is a night of its own, and our road tonight was the road of his teachings. What his teachings promised, his cross accomplished. The debt cancelled at the king's own cost. The blood of the covenant poured out for many. Every word he ever taught, he backed with everything he had. Ahead of us lies the final resting place, the summit, a morning, a mountain in Galilee, and the last sentence of the entire gospel, the one the whole book was climbing toward. But the garden asks us to linger one more moment among the olive trees, where the pressed oil ran, and the willing spirit slept in weak flesh, and the teacher prayed alone. Not as I will, but as you will. If you have strength for one whispered prayer tonight, that one has already been broken in, like a path through deep grass, by the one who prayed it first. The friends failed, and were kept anyway. The cup was not taken away. It was taken up for you. Chapter 15. The Mountain in Galilee. The 15th resting place is the summit, and the summit is bathed in morning. All night we have climbed through the dark, resting place by resting place, and now, at the very end of the road, the gospel itself turns toward the light. Because, between the garden and this mountain, everything happened. The cross was raised outside the city wall. The sky went dark at noon. The teacher gave up his spirit, and was buried in a borrowed tomb, and a great stone was rolled across the door, and sealed, and guarded. And then, before dawn on the first day of the week, the ground shook. Now, after the Sabbath, toward the dawn of the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to see the tomb. And behold, there was a great earthquake, for an angel of the Lord descended from heaven, and came and rolled back the stone and sat upon it. Sat upon it. Of all the details Matthew chose to keep, I love that one most. The angel does not merely move the stone. He sits on it, the way you sit on something whose work is finished forever. The great seal of death, the heaviest object in the whole gospel, has become a bench. And to the frightened women the angel speaks. Do not be afraid, for I know that you seek Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has risen, as he said. Come, see the place where he lay. He is not here. He has risen, as he said. Every promise we gathered on this mountain road, every blessed hour, every do not be anxious, every come to me, all of it was underwritten that morning. A teacher's words are only as good as the teacher's word, and on the first day of the week, the word held. The women ran from the tomb, the gospel says, with fear and great joy, both at once, the way the biggest news always arrives. And Jesus himself met them on the road, alive, and they took hold of his feet and worshipped him. And his first word to them was the word the angel had used, the word this whole gospel keeps handing to the frightened. Do not be afraid. And then he gave them an errand, and the errand is the doorway to our summit. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee, and there they will see me. My brothers, after the denials, after the scattering, after every one of them failed him in the dark, that is the name he sends them. Not the deserters, not the disappointments. My brothers, tell my brothers to go home to Galilee, back to the country where it all began, where the nets were left on the shore, and the sermon settled on the hillside. And there they will see me. Now the 11 disciples went to Galilee, to the mountain to which Jesus had directed them. To the mountain. Matthew does not tell us which one, and the old guides can only guess. But the gospel that gathered its teaching into 5 mountains of words now sets its final scene on one last unnamed height, as if to say, this is what every mountain in the story was pointing toward. The road we walked tonight was always going here. And when they saw him, they worshipped him, but some doubted. Let me stop on that half sentence, because I promised you honesty at every resting place. And this is Matthew's own honesty, preserved on the last page of his gospel, where he could so easily have left it out. Standing on that mountain, looking at the risen teacher with their own eyes, some still wavered. The old word carries the sense of hesitating, standing in 2 minds, wanting to believe and not quite able to get all the way there. And here is the mercy in the record. Jesus does not divide the group. He does not send the doubters down the mountain and commission only the certain. The next verse says he came near and spoke to all of them, worshippers and waverers alike, and gave the whole trembling company the same words and the same promise. If your faith has hesitations in it tonight, you are not outside this scene. You are standing in the middle of it, on the mountain, with the 11 being spoken to. And what he said is the summit of the summit, the final teaching of the teacher, the last words of the entire gospel. And Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go, therefore, and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. Teaching them to observe all that I have commanded you. Do you hear what that sentence does to our whole night? Everything we walked through, the blessings for the lowly, the salt and the light, the secret room, the lilies, the 2 houses, the yoke, the seeds, the 70 times 7, the lamps, the least of these, all of it was gathered by this command and carried out from that mountain into all nations. Fishermen carried it. A former tax collector carried it, if the old tradition holds. Grandmothers carried it, and monks, and mothers whispering over cradles. And somewhere down that long river of voices, across 19 centuries and more, it reached a room with a tired listener in it, tonight, and became this. And then, the last sentence, the one the whole gospel was built to reach. Hear it slowly, because after it, the book falls silent forever. And behold, I am with you always, to the end of the age. I am with you always. The book began, in its first chapter, with a name from the old prophets, Emmanuel, which means God with us. And it ends, on this mountain, with the promise that unpacks the name, I am with you always. All the days, the old language says, literally. All the days. The bright ones and the grey ones. The days of harvest and the days of bare branches. The days you believe easily, and the days you stand on the mountain doubting. All the days to the end of the age. The Gospel of Matthew is a ring, and the jewel set at both ends is the same. God with us. And now, one last time, let me pull the quiet thread we have carried since the first resting place and tie it off. A man once sat at a toll booth outside Capernaum with a ledger in front of him. His whole life was entries and balances, what was owed, what was collected, accounts that never stayed closed, because there is always another debt, always another day's column to fill. That is how ledgers work. They do not end. They just stop, unfinished, when the keeper's hand stops. Then a voice said, "Follow me," and the man stood up and left the ledger open on the table. And whether or not his was the hand that held the pen, the book that bears his name is the work of exactly such a redeemed carefulness. 5 discourses, gathered like columns. Generations, counted like sums. Old promises, balanced against their fulfillments, one by one, like a man proving an account. And at the bottom of the final page, in the place where every ledger of the old life demanded a total, a balance owed. This book enters no number at all. It enters, I am with you always, to the end of the age. The counting life ended with the one entry that never runs out. Not a balance, a presence. The account was settled somewhere off the page, at a table, in a garden, at an empty tomb, and what remained to record was simply this: He is with us, all the days. That is the summit, dear listener. There is no more road above it. 15 resting places, from a toll booth by the lake to a morning mountain in Galilee, and every step of it was walked toward this. You were never climbing alone. That was the secret of the whole mountain.
The road is finished now, and the morning light on that far mountain can hold the watch from here. But one promise remains, and I have carried it for you since the 5th resting place, the way a traveller carries a letter to be opened only at the journey's end. In the middle of the great sermon, behind the door that closes softly, the teacher gave his friends a prayer. I told you then that some gifts belong at the door of sleep. The door is here. So, this is the last thing you will hear tonight. No more teaching. No more road. Just the prayer he taught, whole and slow, in the traditional words with which generations of Christians have closed it, the words that countless weary voices have fallen asleep inside. You do not need to repeat them. You do not need to stay awake for them. Let them be prayed over you, the way a lamp burns in a room where a child is sleeping. Hear it now. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory, forever. Amen. This is Night Psalms, where the ancient words find the ones who need them. The toll booth is empty. The ledger is closed. The mountain road lies quiet behind you, all 15 resting places asleep in the dark, and the only entry left on the last page of the night is the one that never runs out. He is with you always, all the days, including this one as it ends. Sleep now under that promise. Good night.